Welcome to the February 11th, 2025 City Council meeting for the City of Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. Please rise to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. To start it off, let's review the consent agenda. Any questions or discussions?
Mayor, I had a couple. First of all, Chief King, I noticed I thought it was a very nice gesture to send a thank you to everybody who gave something during Christmas to the police station. I got mine and I was like, wow, first time I ever got some thank you. So it was very nice, and very nice gesture, and I liked the letter. It was very professional. And then also, talking about permits. So in permits issued, this is, Amy, what I was talking about, there are 23. Is that year to date in 2024 total? I just wanted to.
Yes, so we're at the beginning of a new year, so it's year to date, there's the year to date column and then monthly.
When you compare that to years past, it was 45 and 39 respectively for the same time frame, correct?
Yes. Are you looking at permits or inspections?
Permits
Or are
issued.
you looking at last year's?
Permits issued. I went back to, I happened to come across the February, agenda.
Yeah, I mean, these are statistics kind of like the screen
From
I
last
showed
year.
it in Planning Commission. For those of you that weren't there, you may not know the reference, but those numbers are data. It's hard to find a trend in those numbers because permit application types change. So it's information. It's helpful when you're making schedules, but it is just that data.
So again, can I just, because not everybody was here for the Planning Commission meeting. So permits issued, these are they just building permits or anything you're saying?
Just building permits.
Just building, so.
On this report.
On this report, so as opposed to the other one that we were at, okay. So this one is, I'm adding on, or building a new house, or they're not windows and new windows or anything like that. Okay, that's good to know.
And I assume there is a trend of less requests?
No.
You don't feel that at all? Okay.
Okay. Leah, you never get away from this Chesterfield culvert. So you said that you're working through the clearance as part of the grant funding. The inspection was completed in January per the requirements, right? And inspection confirmed rehabilitation is still feasible. So you're saying it's still feasible to do this. Do we have a date now that we had to have the inspection completed?
No, so those are two separate things.
Mhm.
The inspection is just a federal requirement every year.
Okay.
The other part is based on the funding. So the city manager, Sandra, and I met with HUD, which is the department that administers the fund today, to talk more about it. That's going to be an ongoing process. It's going to probably take us about 6 months to get through all the environmental reviews and everything that's needed before the department will release the funds and we can move forward into construction.
Okay. It's been so long, Dave. Can you remind me again what's our commitment, or Sandra?
It's it's zero money from us, but we were able to obtain the largest grant the city's ever gotten, $1 million grant, with zero cost by us. No, it's not matching by us.
Mhm.
And it's a real, just so you know, it's a very bureaucratic process. We were on the phone this morning. We had a conference call, and there's a lot of hoops to jump through. And to be honest with you, I'm glad Leah and Sandra are going to take on that responsibility, most of it, because there's a lot of ways you can fail at this thing. But the money's coming, but it might not be it could be 6 months to a year.
Really? Okay.
It's already been a year, right?
Over a year, hasn't it, Leah, since you first came to us?
I don't think so.
I think you're were notified in like October-ish maybe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't think it's going.
September or something, so.
Yeah, maybe September. Yeah, it's just gonna, I mean, I know it's, believe me, I think it's a great thing, and we just had the culvert inspected,
Mhm.
and it's still okay to rehab like we're planning to do. But, you know, boy, this morning I was thinking, I've received several emails from this person, and they're like 2-3 pages long, and she sent a follow-up email that was 2 pages long. So, wow, you know,
Wow.
I'm just,
Thank you for
it's a lot of
everyone for-
work.
Wow.
But we'll get it for you, we promise.
Okay, all right, good. Just want to make sure it doesn't fall in on us. Okay, that's all I have here.
I also had a question. Thank you for doing more construction inspections and doing them midway through. I think that'll help catch things before they're built, that
Mhm.
aren't, anything that's not built according to
Mhm.
what's been approved by planning and zoning. So thank you. And I got a call about builder signs. I know we talked about cleaning those up, but I
Did you
understand.
have any in particular? Because we did go
Gotta-
through
I'll
every
take
single one.
pictures, but you did, okay. But thank you for your efforts on that. I understand there's still a couple out there, but,
Yeah, if there is, let me know. We you know, we changed the policy, or the ordinance, we really appreciate that. And right after we did that, actually, Brian and John went out to every site and made sure it was
thank you
compliant
very
with the
much.
ordinance.
Appreciate it.
And I think they did that, you guys did that like immediately, within the first week.
That's great.
So,
Because the neighbors, you know, it's a long building process.
yes,
So we appreciate that they don't have to look at sign litter. And
maybe you can look at that tomorrow, just make sure, you know, when you're out. Oh, I'm sorry. We'll have John do it. I apologize. Yeah.
You can't take a day off. What are you talking about? That's good. Yeah, that is something, because we have a lot of construction going on in our neighborhood, and I know the neighbors are always complaining about the trucks and the
The
dirt.
dirt, yeah.
You have to have the porta potty at the front of the yard, and,
Yeah,
like-
that's no problem.
okay.
And Chief King, welcome to Ashton Good, I understand. I'm sorry I wasn't here last month, but everything going well with
Yes, very well.
his, okay, great.
Good.
Warm welcome. Thank you. Any other,
I've got one final question. For Sandra, in the register this past month, duplicate payment refunds. So there were a series of events where, I'm just curious what checks in place where, one, you do it, and two, you catch it.
A lot of the refunds this past month came from the collection taxing companies. So the biggest one is CoreLogic. And if somebody has an escrow, he collects the money and gives it to the taxing, or to the CoreLogic, who then pays. And what happens quite often is we get a payment from the resident as well as from the tax
The escrow.
company. So we always refund whoever pays second.
Got it.
So that's why you do see a handful on this report, because we received quite a few for the winter tax bill.
Got it. Surprised you get your money's escrowed, and then you write the check. That's pretty, that's a great citizen. Okay.
I
right.
asked that same question, by the way, earlier.
Oh, did you?
In the other meeting, I
All
was
right.
with her.
We were supposed to wait till now.
I'm sorry, I know, but we were just talking.
All right. That's all I have.
I had the same thought, though. Who does that?
I just had a quick question on.
Sure.
All the other ones were already answered, but the access control, just trying to understand what that is. Seems like
what page is that?
pretty hefty
First page.
first page. The flying locksmiths.
Yeah,
Oh, I
it's a-
noticed that too. Did we update the locks?
Yeah, it's a capital expenditure, and so it was approved, but we're changing all the accesses everywhere. Matter of fact, we even have an access into the door there, but we're just changing all the access. They're all outdated and they're not working, so we just changed all the access to doors, all secure doors around the whole campus.
Key card access or?
Well, most of them are fob, but there's a lot of them that are fob and key access, and luckily all the ones that I have to go through are key access, because I'll probably forget my fob.
Mm.
But yeah, that's how it works.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then is that an updated media for this room, that 8,500 on page 3? Or is that just the regular video billing for taping the meetings?
website.
Oh,
There's a
okay.
company that did some video for us to update our website. So
Oh, I see. So you, okay, posted some video to the website?
I don't think that the.
We had hired a company to kind of help us revamp the website with video and photos. So when we'll launch this, you'll be able to go on our website and it'll be like a loop of a video. Then it'll show the major points of our city. And we've gone through the website and made it more user-friendly, robust, and everything else. As far as the city commission room, audio-visual, we did go through the bid process and we did find the lowest bidder. And we've engaged with them and they should be moving on that. I hope to get that done in March, end of March.
Great, thank you.
I did have one more. I between the planning commission and the city commission meeting, I ran into Sandra and had a lot of questions. You guys did, so she answered them. But one of them I thought you guys would find really interesting because I had a neighbor stop me this last week when it was really icy and everything, complimenting, as usual, the great job that DPW does. And he goes, "We must go through a lot of salt in the city." And he asked me how much. And so I talked to Sandra. If I say this wrong, let me know. So if you look on page 4 of 7, there's 4 payments there for Detroit Salt. That's about 50 tons each for those. And we go through we committed to 1,200 to 1,400 tons of salt this year. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So just as a fun fact for you guys to know, and we pay anywhere, did I write this, $52 to $53 a ton?
Somewhere in that range.
Yeah, 52 to 53 a ton. So if you do the math, you'll get to what our total is for salt. But I would, again, I'm not questioning how much salt. It was just a resident asked me. I think we are notoriously famous for having the best roads in the wintertime.
Yeah.
People literally go and they say, "I know when I'm in the city because the roads are clear." And it's true. There was that ice storm last, I don't know, Thursday or whatever, and I'm out with my dog and here comes the salt truck. It's like, it's amazing what they do.
Yeah, sometimes I'll be sitting in my living room and I have on my phone, it'll tell me when the alarm is disconnected at DPW. When they turn it on and turn it off. So I look at my phone, oh, alarm's off. No, I look outside, it's snowing outside. So, I mean, they're on it.
They are on it.
That's great.
That's just
Yeah.
amazing,
You're
yeah.
only gonna get stuck in your driveway.
I did have one, though, I was not here. The parliamentary services, I guess that was discussed at the last meeting, and I'm sorry.
Yeah, so that's one of our goals, and so we did have, we have a person that is most likely gonna provide the services, but she did some preliminary work. I think she charges about $100 an hour. So she reviewed some planning commission tapes and videos and all the information, and she met with us a couple of times, I believe, and yeah, so that's what that cost. Well, how much was I think it's like $450.
Yeah, it was $450. I just
Yeah.
wondered, okay.
So
And you guys talked about it at the last meeting?
yes,
Okay,
yeah, it was approved in the.
okay. Okay.
Okay. Well, speaking of the last meeting, we'd like to review the minutes from the previous meeting, and are there any corrections or additions?
No.
May I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda for February 11th, 2025, as presented?
I move
I
to
move
approve.
we approve the consent agenda as presented, including the minutes.
I second that.
Those in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed, say nay. Consent agenda is approved. Public comment. Now, we will open the floor for public comments. If there's anyone in the audience who wishes to address the council, please step forward, state your name and your address for the record. Please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Hello. I'm public comment, I guess, right?
Could you please state your name and your
Yes,
address?
Dirk Beckerle. I think as everybody knows by now, after 44 years of practicing municipal law, I'm going to retire effective April 15th of this year. We don't have to say our goodbyes now. I'll be at the March meeting. I'll be at the April meeting. But I wanted to take the opportunity to introduce you to my replacement, both here and as managing partner of the municipal department at Seacrest Wardle. It's Mark Roberts is a partner in our firm. He's been with our firm 25 plus years. He's a seasoned lawyer. There won't be any drop off. I promise you, you'll love him. Mark currently is representing West Bloomfield, or doing the majority of the West Bloomfield account. He's also assisting me in Bloomfield Township, so he's very familiar with the area. And he's going to grow to love Bloomfield Hills like I've grown to love Bloomfield Hills. But I just wanted to take the chance now to formally introduce Mark. I think that probably the first time you'll see him will be at the May meeting. But Mark Roberts,
All right.
City Commission. So
Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Dirk, we all appreciate all your hard work and terrific advice over all the years. Just
Thank you. It's
really impressive and
my honor and privilege to
much appreciated. Thank you. The commission will now hear a presentation from Jill. Well, I guess I should ask if there's anyone else in the audience. No, okay. We will now hear a presentation from Jill Baum, city planner and partner at Giffords Webster on clear zoning.
Good evening. Thank you so much for giving myself and Eric Peach the opportunity to share with you something that we do for many of our communities, and we really think it's great, and we think it would be wonderful for the city of Bloomfield Hills. Then we're delighted that you're considering it. So I have a short presentation that explains clear zoning, and then we can demonstrate an actual ordinance so that you can see how it works. The slideshow is just static, and I'll go through it fairly quickly. But first, I wanted to take a second to reintroduce and introduce myself to some of our new council folks, and explain a little bit about who we are at Giffords Webster in terms of the planning team. So, as you noticed, I am the partner in charge of the planning and landscape architecture and GIS teams at Giffords Webster, and I've been a planning consultant since 2008. I was a city planner before that, worked for the city of Birmingham and worked in other communities. As a planning consultant, I went to work with Rod Arroyo and Dave Birchler, and the company was known as Birchler Arroyo. We changed the name to Clear Zoning, and you'll see a little bit why in a minute. And then we merged in with Giffords Webster in 2016. Rod and Dave were great mentors as I started out as a planning consultant, really being known as leaders and educators in planning and zoning. And immediately when I started working with them, was tasked with presentations at the Michigan Association of Planning, volunteering. Both of them were board members for the Michigan Association of Planning. Actually, I think when they were, it was Michigan Society of Planning Officials and Michigan Planning Associations. There were two different organizations. I'm currently on the board of the Michigan Association of Planning, which is very rewarding, talking to planners all across the state of Michigan. And we do a lot of presentations. These are just a couple of the things that we've done over a few years. Participated in writing zoning practice. It's a national publication through the American Planning Association. We actually are going to be working on one this month on universal design and zoning. So just kind of different things that we do. Just a couple of our other things, and I wanted to highlight future-proofing your planning and zoning department. That was one of the sessions that Eric led at Michigan Municipal Executives and Michigan Association of Planning. We did that one a couple of times. So we just wanted to kind of give you a little background on that. We also work with the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. We've worked with MEDC for over 10 years, specifically on their Redevelopment Ready Communities program. This is a program, if you're not familiar with it, intended to help communities not necessarily be developer friendly, but really to be able to get the kind of development that they want in their community, to convey through their best practices, which there's 6 of them, starts at number 1, which is really about your planning, and then it moves through the process. So planning, zoning, development review, public participation planning, economic development strategies, and training. And so all of those things together really make a community strategic in how they are directing growth and development and change in their communities, that they have a vision that they've articulated in their master plan, that they then create zoning language that supports that, that they have an efficient and effective development review process that gives you clear and consistent results, which I think those are all things that we do here. and that you do very well. We worked with the MEDC to help them develop those two, specifically on zoning ordinances and the development review process back 10 years ago, and trained folks all over the state, which was really, really fun and interesting. And one of the coolest things was talking to a group of folks, it's me talking, I don't remember where that one was, that was not probably Marquette, where it was 8 degrees below zero and our eyelashes froze when we went up there for that one. But talking to people who weren't planners and weren't zoning administrators, so we might have clerks, we might have folks from city councils, sitting in there and hearing about how zoning is created in their communities and how it starts with their master plan and how it works through the development review process. And to see the light bulbs go on was really rewarding. And it kind of reinforced for me then, till today, that anybody at City Hall should be able to answer basic zoning questions. So hold that thought. As I said, Rod and Dave were really innovative over time, and I have taken that in as the way that I lead my team now. But back then, Rod and Dave were thinking about how we could present material, convey information to the public, as well as to the staff and officials. How do we do that? We can do it through things like online matrix fillable forms, and in fact, they developed the first online development manual for the city of Novi back in 1998. If you remember what the internet was like in 1998, we don't even really think about that, how different it was. Now, of course, we think, well, everything should be online. They did the same thing for the city of Detroit in 1999, and these just kind of led into the development of clear zoning, which I'll get to in a second. One of the other things that we do are zoning audits. So again, we're kind of zoning, we really like zoning. Some of us like zoning on our team. Most of us really like it. And I was talking to a student over the weekend. We had the student conference for Michigan Association of Planning, and it was down at Wayne State, and there were students from all of the colleges in the area. And I spoke with this young man who was telling me about his current experience as an intern in a community where he was working on zoning, and he's like, it's so fun. I'm like, ooh, write this guy's name down, because maybe someday we can snag him. But we really find it interesting. And Dirk, you probably feel this way, and maybe Mark, you do too. It's really interesting looking at zoning codes, trying to figure out what were they trying to solve, what problem were they trying to solve when they wrote this language? How is it interpreted today? And when we write new language, how are we making sure that, not necessarily that we think of everything, because we can't think of everything. There will always be crazy things that come up that we never anticipated. But looking at those things through that lens of just trying to think of the main things that we're doing, and again, what we're trying to accomplish. So what does our master plan say? And how are we implementing that through our zoning language? And how are we being clear so that people understand it? So those are the things that we really are striving for, and those are sort of the through lines. So clear zoning was developed in 2008. We had a copyright on it for the formatting and for the way that it's organized. And it came out of actually a failed proposal to a community to redo their zoning ordinance. And we weren't selected, but we thought, you know what, there's something that we really are feeling about this project, and we want to kind of turn it around and turn it into something else. And we were working with Grand Blanc Township, and they were willing to let us give it a shot with their ordinance. So that was our first ordinance. They still have it. They're still a client. And it really changed the way that they could convey information to their communities and to their property owners. So right now, we have over 25 communities across the United States, in fact. We had our most recent out-of-state clear zoning was adopted in a very small town called Horace, North Dakota. They are a suburb of Fargo, a rapidly growing area. They put out a request for proposals, and we responded to it because we offer a very unique product. It was a complete zoning rewrite too, so it was starting from scratch. They had just adopted a comprehensive plan, and they wanted to implement that with several new zoning districts and form-based codes, and we can talk about that at another time probably. But they And so that was a really interesting process, and they selected us, and so we worked with them, mostly remote. We went there a couple of times, and it was during COVID too, in fact. So it was an interesting process working with them remotely, but we do have clear zoning all across the state. We did receive a recognition by the American Planning Association, their Small Town Rural Planning Division, for a clear zoning ordinance that we did for the city of Lathrop Village. Included our first interactive zoning map that we did. Now we do that fairly standard for many of our communities where their data is available to us. So what is clear zoning? What is it all about? It's an ordinance transformation. It's reorganizing the ordinance, it's reformatting it, it's providing updated graphics, hyperlinks, it's looking at clarifications and corrections and incorporating amendments as we go. The ordinance is reorganized into 7 articles, and we always do 7 articles. There are a couple of ordinances that include, in fact the one in Horace also included a subdivision ordinance, so that became, we had 8 articles there. But the reason we do it this way is we kind of think about, well, what's the information that someone might be looking for? They might just want to know, what can I build in this zoning district? Or I know I'm zoned for this, what can I do? What are my setbacks? They might just want basic questions. They might want to know, well, how do we define building frontage? I need to look that up, so I'm always going to find that in the definition. Sometimes as ordinances are amended over time, definitions might be added to a section, or standards might be added to a section. And so our information can get kind of scattered throughout the ordinance. This way, every time you want to know what is the standard for lighting, you're going to go to the site standards, because that's always going to have all your standards for the site itself. And then development procedures, we want it to be easy for people to figure out how they get through a process. And then administration and enforcement. The list of permitted uses, the use and dimensional standards are simplified, and you'll see that in a second. All the use standards go into a new section, and the dimensional standards are illustrated. So here's before, and it's kind of a fuzzy picture, but that is from your ordinance. That's the institutional district. And so you can see sometimes when we have a list of uses, which would be like, what's the first one? Schools. The second one is churches and religious retreat facilities, but then it's got a whole bunch of things listed, municipal buildings. So what we would do in a clear zoning ordinance is we would move that out of the way and just make the list very simple and straightforward, because sometimes it can be overwhelming. So it would look like this. So you'd have your list of uses there, where you can see blue text, and hopefully you can see that. It's primarily down here under the special land uses. Those are in blue text. Those are clickable. So if you click on that, it'll take you to that section, and then you'll find the conditions if you need more information. If you just want to know the basics right there, this is what you might be able to look at. And then on the other side of the page, if we open it as a 2-page spread, are all the dimensional standards with a little graphic, and then how to calculate building height. And there are hyperlinks there. We have updated graphics, so you can see, and these are actually your graphics. But we don't need to do graphics like that anymore, right? Because now we have the technology, we can make them in our computers, we can see them in color, we can even print them in color. Back in the day, we had to be careful about how we were printing and photocopying and reproducing. And so sometimes our images look faded over time. But we can do a lot more in terms of illustration, particularly with the ability to use a shading and colors to indicate different things that we might need. We have hyperlinks within the document, really trying to help users better navigate the ordinance. So you'll see the side tabs here. The green one will let you know where you are. Anytime there's blue text, that's a hyperlink to additional information, and then our bottom buttons there will take us back to the beginning, back to our use matrix, or back to the map. People don't need to have any kind of special software to use the clear zoning ordinance. It's really just Adobe Reader or another kind of PDF reader. It's free. You can put it on your computer. We do have some helpful setup tips for people when they're going to start to use it through Adobe Acrobat that make it easier to even move around through there. That is information that we put into the ordinance itself too at the beginning under a how to use this ordinance section, so readers can figure that out. Terms and phrases are word searchable. So you might be familiar, if you do Control F in a PDF, you'll get the find, and then you can hit next, next, next. If you open up a full search, you can get a little bit more context. So now I don't have to go through all 27 instances of fences. If I know there's one section I'm looking for, I can find it easily here using an expanded search. And the nice thing is that most people are familiar with how to use a PDF program. In the beginning of the ordinance, there's a how to use this ordinance section, and so we have some symbols there. We have a little graphic, a little pen with a hand that shows you there's a graphic that's related to it so people can find that. Table of contents, again, that's all clickable. The how to use this ordinance section, and that's what it looks like in the ordinance. So it has the arrows and it's describing how it works so that people can find their way easily through it. This again is a little highlight of a blow up of an area that shows a little bit more clearly those sections. You'll see too that there's a number included after that as innovators when we presented the clear zoning ordinance to your neighbor Bloomfield Township. And they were pretty early on as well. I don't remember what year, maybe 2009 or 10. But we just had the blue text, and they said, well, if we have it printed in a book, it's not clickable. How do we get to that section? So we started putting in the section number. So whether you've got it printed out or whether you're using it online, you can figure out where you're supposed to go. Interesting, and I don't know if you've all experienced this, but I feel like, and I almost brought like a printed book with me, but because we used to have all the books for all of our communities, but we don't really use them that way anymore. Like, I think most of us are using the code book online as we've intended for it to be, but still there are people who like to have that printed version. They've got it highlighted, they got bookmark tabs in it, they've got post-it notes, they've got highlights of where their favorite sections are, and that's still something that people can do. In fact, when we do amendments, say for example we were going to update the office service district here and we were going to add a couple of uses and we were going to move some things over, and that was the only thing that we did. We would give you the full ordinance back, but we would give you this page and the page on the other side so that someone could print it out double-sided, just print out that page and stick it in their book. That's the only page that we changed. So people can keep their ordinances updated however they like to do it. In the PDF reader, you can create bookmarks though, and you can highlight things. So if people like to do that still, that's something that's available. There is also, we like to use tables and matrices quite a bit to convey information. It's just a way of organizing things a little bit differently. So this is a blow up on the right that shows you a section number, some sections, and then this would be like your notes to the district standards, and then where those apply with a check mark. Definitions, table of context, all of those terms are linked to easier access. And again, graphics, we can use different colors, we can have different shapes that we can use, and what we really are trying to do is explain to people in different ways. So sometimes people can read something and understand what it's meant. Sometimes it helps to look at a photo or a graphic and have a better understanding. So we kind of do both of those things so that people really are able to answer those questions that they have. Again, it does print the same way it looks online. So your current ordinance is on Municode, and when you print it, sometimes if you've tried that, it gets kind of wonky, especially tables, and the graphics are kind of, they come on different pages, they may not break cleanly, but that's one of the nice things about this. And you don't have any annual fees, you just host it on your own website. So it's a PDF, like I said, you just can keep it there, and it's available 24/7. The advantage of having that available 24/7 is that people can find the answers to basic questions at any time, wherever they are. Maybe they are going to just do that, they're going to find the information that they need, and then maybe they'll follow up. Maybe they'll call City Hall when they have a chance, like, hey, I've got a couple extra questions about this, but I was able to get through the basic things. If someone was not here, someone was on vacation, or if they can't reach one of us, if they're trying to get a hold of planners, this information is available. Or someone here could say, well, I know how to use this code. I can tell you, if you tell me what district you're in, I can send you a list of all of and tell you what page to find that information on. I actually had an experience walking a resident, I can't remember which community it was, but she had called because she had some questions about what district she was in and what she could do with her property. And I was explaining to her how to find the ordinance. And so I was on the phone with her, walking her through it. And she was like, this is great. I said, you really see this? And you click that, and this is wonderful. This is great. Thank you. So it's nice when we hear people are able to find that information on their own. And I think she felt a little bit empowered that she could answer her own questions, which was nice. All right. I do have this. Oops. It was supposed to. So, you know what? It worked, didn't it? You saw it. Maybe it's, oh wait, here. Okay, maybe it just didn't like it because it was full screen. So this is the city of Springfield over on the west side of the state. I think I can click out of that and move this down. Okay, so this is the city of Springfield's zoning ordinance or zoning map. And if we click on a parcel, we can open that up and it'll tell us, the pop-up is a little bit different on this browser. But the zoning is IRT, Industrial Research and Technology. We know it's 11 acres and we've got a parcel ID number if someone wanted to confirm that. If they click Clear Zone it, it'll take us right to that page in the ordinance. So it goes right there. Somebody can see, okay, here's the permitted uses. And I can see all of those. They've got a lot in their ordinance. And then they can look at the development standards as well. If they knew, I'm going to say we had I remember I looked up one. I think that might be it. Nope. I don't remember. I was trying to look up one of these little parcels, but you can look it up by address as well. And again, that one's R2, one family residential. It's a 0.4 acres. And it'll take us to that section as well. So from that, I wanted to show you another ordinance. This one is the city of Grosse Pointe Woods. This isn't too old. And just to show you a little bit about how you can navigate through here. So for example, I can look at the use matrix if I want to zoom in a little bit more closely. Maybe I would like to build a duplex, a two-family dwelling, and I'm going to see here that those are permitted in the R2 and the R4 district. So I can click that and it'll take me right to that page. I can find more information there. Maybe while I'm here, I see, and I've got my development standards, I can see my setbacks. I can, how do I calculate building height? This is a question that we get all the time. How do we do that? So we go here and we can see, it actually takes us to a graphic. We have a definition, we have the height of a building here, but we also show for the different building types how that is calculated. We can go back to the use matrix. We can go to the home page where we go back to our table of contents, and the I takes us back to that, how do I use this ordinance? So again, explaining to people how to find the information, how everything is laid out, and how they can navigate through the ordinance. The last thing that I think I will show you is what happens when we have an amendment. So I'm going to go to the very end, and you can see this one, they've only had a couple. But at the very end of the code, it shows you that they had 2 ordinance adoption ordinances in 2022. We keep a list of those at the back, so this is the very last page of the ordinance, but if I wanted to see what it was, I can click here and find that, and it'll show me at the bottom of the page when that was amended. And then again, I can hyperlink back and see wherever I am. So that's kind of the last thing that we could talk about that I could show you. But then I'm happy to answer any questions that you have or anything else that you'd like to know about it.
How does all the information get input, for example?
We do that all ourselves.
You do it, so
Yeah.
you're constantly updating?
Yes,
I see.
yes. And we have kind of two kinds of clients. We have, and really, most of our clients send us the ordinance amendments as they happen, as they're adopted, which is what we prefer, because it's easier. If we get an amendment like we did for these two, okay, it's one section, we're gonna go here, we're gonna update it, and then they get their ordinance back quickly, and they're able to host it back up online pretty quickly, within a couple of weeks, usually 2 weeks. We do have a couple of communities that hold on to them for a very long time. We have one community right now that has held on to them for so long that they actually amended a section that they amended previously, but they hadn't sent it to us, so it hadn't been updated. And so that one, that's just a big ball of string that's all tangled up. So we're trying to pull it all out and stretch it out nice and long so that they can figure out what we need to do to fix that situation, so. But
And with respect to all the initial groundwork in
Yes.
terms of inputting
That's all,
everything,
we do all
of
of that, right?
is that like a comprehensive project for
It
you
is.
to do that?
It is. It's really, it requires an understanding of the zoning regulations themselves so that things make sense. So that we know when we're looking at, for example, definitions. So maybe we're reading a definition and we're seeing that there's actually a standard in there. I don't think you have too many of those, but we've had that where maybe it's a definition of building height, or maybe an accessory building. And then in the definition, it'll say the accessory building can't exceed 14 feet in height. Well, that doesn't belong in the definition because often no one would see that. So we're going to pull that part of it out and we're going to put that in the section for site standards so we know that's about the development of that structure. So it requires that, and then a lot of quality checking and making sure that we've caught everything.
There's an annual fee for updates?
No, well, for updates, anytime we get an amendment, it's $25 per page that's changed. So in that example that we were just adding uses to that one page, that's a one-page change, it's $25. Sometimes there are multiple pages changed if there's a comprehensive amendment that comes through. Maybe we're adding a definition, we're adding a use to the residential districts, maybe there's 4 of them, and maybe there's a standard that goes with it, so now maybe we're up to 10 pages. So that would be $250 for those 10 pages. So again, you'd get back the entire ordinance and then the double sides of the pages that changed if people are still using the book and they want to print those out.
You manage the site?
You host it.
You host it, right?
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah, we just send you the PDF.
got it.
And we walk you through how to do that so that it's always in the same place, which is critical when we're using the interactive map. As you can see, when you click on that parcel, it's going to that specific page so that the file has to be in the same place so that those two things match. But we walk you through that. It's pretty straightforward.
What's the initial fee?
We've given you an estimate to the city manager, so we can talk through
Yeah,
that.
the estimate I think was about $35,000. But we haven't gone through a process of looking at other options yet. So we'll have to go through that process according to our purchasing policy. But, to be honest with you, this is kind of a light meeting, so why not bring them in and at least show you what we want to accomplish, whether it's through clear zoning or another product.
Who do you say is the customer for this product?
Well, that's a good question. I think we think of it as property owners, residents, but we also think of it as staff and planning commissioners, anybody that's involved with the development review process. Because often, what's interesting is when we'll do a clear zoning conversion and the planning commission will walk through something. We actually had this in the one that we did in Ruston, Louisiana. There was a really old section of their zoning ordinance that no one knew was there. And when they were reading through, they were like, what is this thing? It had to do with dogs or something. They're like, what is this section in here? Why did you add this? And we're like, this literally came from 1967. Like, this is so old, it's just been buried in your code and nobody knew about it. So there are often sections of the code that people aren't familiar with. And when they see it all in this new way, it just is a new way of thinking about things. But it also helps as planning commissioners are doing their review, and we've written a section, maybe the standard per this section, that they can just click, oh, let's go there, let's look at this, and now this makes more sense, because now I see there's a graphic here. So it's really intended to help kind of the entire, anybody who touches the development review process, I think.
But didn't you also say that part of your service is to evaluate the
Yes.
procedures that we have in place, and so maybe in some instances you'd raise a flag and say, the new one would look like this if you wanted updated, or?
Right, so for the clear zoning conversion, we just do the conversion, because we've also found that when we're trying to introduce language change amendments, at the same time, it can get confusing. Like the dog situation. Like, we've just presented the ordinance, and we say, this is your exact ordinance. We haven't changed anything of substance. We might change things like, there's some misspelled words, or there's two definitions of building. They're pretty similar, we're gonna keep one of them. So those kinds of things. You have some bad cross-referencing. This goes to this section, but it doesn't really, so it goes here. And then we can just say there's nothing else that we've added or taken away, which is helpful, because if people are looking at this for the first time and they've never seen the zoning ordinance before, and now they see this really nice format, but they're like, well, what else did you change? And we say, nothing, we didn't, everything's here. And then to go with that, we do a cross-reference spreadsheet. So the spreadsheet goes both ways too. That was a thing that came out of one of our other clients. But everything in the new code or the old code is written in a spreadsheet, and then you can see where the new section number is. So if it was section 26-32 in the old section, now it's section 5.3, and they can see where it was. And then it also goes the other way, so that if someone sees, what's this section 5.4, I've never seen that before, they can cross-reference and say, oh, we did have this in the old ordinance, and nobody ever paid any attention to that before.
So there's no critiquing of the ordinance, it's just
Well,
simply.
no, there's that too. We do both of those things.
All right.
So there is
As
critiquing.
part of the original package? or-
It is. So there'll be some things that we'll go through, and we'll, typically we look at the master plan, we look at how well the zoning ordinance aligns with the master plan's goals. We look for some of the key things. We look at, we're not legal experts, but we do look for religious land use and institutionalized persons, conflicts, RLUIPA. For example, are you treating churches, places of worship, differently than you would treat other places of assembly? Those are kind of the things that we look for. Wireless communications facilities. We might look at some of those kinds of things. So there's those, and then we'll make those will be available.
So
and planning commission
you
can
flag those.
We do.
All right, and then, all right.
Yeah, and then when we go through the code, there might be things where we say, you have two definitions of building, they're wildly different. So that's a policy change. Or you have this section here, but we see it as we're pulling things together, that it conflicts with this section over here. If it's a policy decision, that would be part of like the audit process too. Things that we can fix easily, like two definitions are the same and we can resolve that, we'll just make those changes. And we give you a whole list of things that we fix.
Can you click on a lot and see what, I mean, I know you show the graphic of, where's the front yard, the backyard, side yard. Does it equate that
That's a really good question.
calculation? There's that,
Are you asking, can you click on a lot and then it shows you yard definition?
Right.
Or
Is
That's
there
a
AI?
great. Is that what you're saying?
That's right, about the
it would show
algebraic.
the yard definition for sure. I thought it would, for sure, at least do that, right?
To do what? I'm sorry.
On the
Show the
lot
backyard,
itself,
side
probably
yard.
not, but on the lot itself, if you click on, is that what you're saying, you click on
Yeah, I
those-
guess I thought it looked like she had it up here, but.
Well, let's see.
They show yard, well,
That's
No,
Rev
I
two.
don't think it would.
No, but I
It
want
would
to make
just-
sure I'm
It would just state
understanding
the
your,
ordinance, it would not,
yeah,
it
it
would
just
would,
gonna
not tell you
take-
which is which.
right,
It
Ah.
would say
Great
this is
question,
the
though.
ordinance.
Yeah.
right. So like if I click this lot here,
I was like, that'd be a
Right.
lot of work to do each
Right,
lot.
no.
Well, it'd be, that'd be II, that's the next step.
well, I mean, that's,
And do you
you
do
would go,
something
you'd
like the
go here
algebraic
and you'd
equation?
see, it would tell you here on this page what your setbacks are required to be,
But it doesn't
but it won't
define.
tell me what they
doesn't
are.
tell you yard definition.
Oh,
Right.
got it. So
Right.
that's just blanket
Yeah,
for each
yeah.
property.
All
And
That
will
would be
it
really,
calculate
for this
your-
community, doing a yard definition like that?
That would be
intense.
pretty
That would be
neat.
sweet. That would be very,
That'd be a challenge.
That would
Wouldn't
be
please
Would be.
everybody.
Would be-
that would take us some time. I'm sure we could do it, but that would take some
Well,
time.
what is that calculation called, Eric?
The algebraic formula?
Algebraic formula? I mean,
That
can
we
you,
can't do because we always need there to be a building to measure from. And the building's really the driver of the, not
What's the
answer.
ratio
Right,
relative
yeah.
to the lot? That would make sense.
Yeah,
so it won't help with any of that.
not with that part. I always need my hands to
That's
describe
what we're here for.
how that one works.
We do.
That's what the architects and engineers do.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
But we could potentially put more graphics in there to demonstrate how that, I feel like a different graphic might be able to help people understand how to do that. And really, like more to the point, why? Because I feel like when I explain it to people, and I'm sure you are like this too, Eric, when you explain it, like, I think at first I feel we were like, what is this formula? Like, oh my gosh. But once you see it, it's like, oh, this makes so much sense. Like, the bulk of the building is in the middle of the property, and as it goes towards the side yards, it gets smaller. Like, just you need hands to be able to show that.
Well, it's like a balloon, if you know, you squeeze
Right,
it this way, then
right.
it's-
Like if you want
you can't.
something tall, it needs to be over here in the middle so that your neighbors are not feeling imposed by that structure. So I think people get it when you explain it like that, but it doesn't make it easier for them to determine it necessarily. But I think once people understand the purpose of it, it's like, all right, we just have to do this.
Okay, I get it. I just have this is like a question, a curiosity, actually. The codes, I've gone through them several times, and I always get lost in there and trying to find what I'm looking for, and there is a certain cryptic aspect to it. Was there any intentionality behind the way it's currently organized? And when you reorganize it, is there anything lost from the original? Like maybe they group things together for a reason originally. Not that it makes a ton of sense now, but I'm just wondering about.
You might have more of an insight into that.
I can't explain why it's set the way it is now. I mean, that was done a long time ago. I will tell you that I use this all the time in Bloomfield Township, and this is
Way better.
much easier.
Hmm.
It's much, when you deal with zoning ordinances, after a while, even older ones like ours, you sort of know how things fit. But if you don't, this is terrific.
Yeah.
But it won't tell you if the house that you're designing will fit.
No, we'd have to make a whole calculator for that. But actually, I know that there's at least one architect that did that built his own little calculator for like figuring out exactly how that building could be shaped to meet the ordinance. It was pretty impressive.
So I don't see our residents going online and looking up ordinances. I just don't see them doing it. But I see the value for an architect or for someone who is presenting to you, maybe. But we have a lot of repeat architects and I don't know. We're gonna have to evaluate the cost of this based on how many users will really benefit, like to your question.
I'd like to know, I can see these costs spiraling, really adding up, because we change ordinances all the time. So I'd like to know from other communities how much they pay this year, yearly on this. It sounds like 35,000, oh, it's no big deal, but this $25 a page could really add up. And also, I just wonder, this is probably for buildings and things like that. And what we just talked about with Brian, 45 a year or something? So you're talking about 45 people possibly using this. I mean, we have 5 square miles and we don't really have a city center. So we're not building big buildings. I'm not saying no, I'm just trying to justify the cost of this. And will our residents really benefit? Will all of our residents that are out there really benefit from it? Or is it just going to be those few architects or whatever who come in and build in the city. I mean, I teased earlier in the planning commission meeting, Matt Moser knows our ordinance better than any of us. And Young, they come in here, they know it better than any of us. They've been in front of us, so.
I mean, from my perspective, from the city side's perspective, there's some good statistics that Amy had pointed out. One stat is that we have about 500 building permits a year and about 190 big projects a year. And out of those 190 projects, probably about 5, 6, 7 people are having to go into our ordinances to review things. I know that our staff on a daily basis, a lot of our staff looks into the ordinances. I find it confusing. Our own city attorney finds it confusing. And so, I don't know. I see a lot of value in this. This is, I think, a big deal for the city. This would be one of the best, in my opinion, one of the best improvements that we've done in the city. I don't know what, Brian, what do you think about it? You deal with ordinances all the time.
I agree with Dave. I mean, the amount of calls me and John get and checking ordinance, this would help the city staff, the city as a whole.
And keep in mind too, that while this current city staff knows the current ordinance, when you start having turnover, that's when people are gonna have to learn it all over again. It's much easier to learn from something like that than.
Oh, we don't let people leave.
That goes back to the session that Eric did at the MME and the MAP conference on future-proofing your zoning ordinance, and that's part of it. Because we say people retire, people move on, people win the lottery, but we want to make sure that the people that come after us know how to find all those sections in the code and give new. Not that we don't love Matt Mosier, because we do love Matt Mosier's plans. They're great, because he knows the ordinance. And same
Yes.
with Young, it's. You know those people that when you see their plans, you're like, oh, good. But there could be opportunities for others that maybe we've got a barrier because our ordinance is a little bit challenging to work with. We also find that when someone maybe has got a question about a neighboring property or they just want to see what, I've got this vacant lot next to me, I wonder what could happen there. And not necessarily, like we've got a lot of residential areas, so that might not be as much of the case, but certainly that, and then future planning commissioners too, so that they can find and feel like they know as much as anybody else on the planning commission, even if they're newer, that they can still have access to that information and find out how things work and how things go through the process. It's really helpful and good for your community to have that kind of availability and access for your ordinances.
I see a lot of value in it. Just organizing it, getting our arms around it. It's not available, readily available. If you think about it, we just spent, 8,000 updating our website?
Yeah.
I mean, this is a document that's been around for 30 years.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of redundancy and things that are wrong, and we don't even know it's wrong. It gives us an opportunity to fix things. So I think there's a lot of value in it.
Yeah, I think it would be a good investment. I like the idea that it's a one-time investment, and then it doesn't sound like it's a huge amount to keep it today.
It really isn't. And like I said, most of our communities do send them as they adopt them. So, I could find out, without using the names of some of them, I could just pull a few and just see what they paid like.
I think we need to know our total cost.
Yeah.
I think that
It
would be
depends
very
on
helpful.
But it really does also depend on the community and how engaged they are with changing the code. When they maybe did a master plan and now they've got a whole slew of amendments that they're making, they might have more changes that they're making. We have some communities, Grosse Pointe Woods, you saw that one, 2022. We just finished a master plan for them, but they haven't had any amendments in 2 years. So two. So they haven't had to pay us anything for 2 years, but they've had their code. So it kind of depends on
Could you
how.
provide us a list of cities that are using it?
Yeah, that
We
would be
could
helpful
go
too.
to the website and kind of
Yeah.
navigate.
Amy?
It may be helpful if when Jill's pulling information, We do currently use MuniCode, and there is the same fee that every time an ordinance is updated, we have to pay a fee for it to be updated, so we could provide you the information of our current use as well as what it would be expected with this.
That would be very helpful, yes.
Because it is the same thing. You have to pay to update your ordinance.
Okay.
What is the one we use now?
MuniCode.
Unicode.
To
Okay.
host as well.
Is that
You pay a hosting fee
State
for
thing?
MuniCode. You pay a hosting fee as well as a per ordinance fee.
Would we still continue with that?
No.
We
Well,
would do
not
it,
for the zoning code, no.
but for the rest of the ordinances, we would.
That would be very helpful, because if
There's
it's
an
just
opportunity to do the
yeah.
city code too, but
Oh.
we thought we'd take one step at a time.
so this is like an updated version of Municode? I mean, it would definitely update our
MuniCode, to my
website.
knowledge, does not offer this product. So
No.
this is as you saw, it's a trailblazer in the way that codes are organized. MuniCode is a very static 1980 way of doing things.
Okay. It's called community code?
MuniCode.
MuniCode.
Municipal.
Municipal code.
Okay.
So this would replace the zoning ordinances
The Municode.
completely. We wouldn't keep that
Right.
as a separate,
This would be the new
so
document.
no one would be looking at the archaic
Right.
language at all. Okay, we'd just be relying on this.
And do you keep a hard copy in
You can?
the back,
Mhm.
right here?
Absolutely. And we actually send two versions when we send the code back. We send a secured version, that's the one you put online, just to make sure that people aren't breaking it apart. But we do send one that's unsecured. So, for example, if Amy wanted to send, this page and like a whole section on landscaping to somebody, she could just extract those pages and just send a PDF of that. So here's just the section on landscaping. She could tell them to go look online. But if they just were interested in one thing, they could just change that, pull that out. So sometimes that's helpful.
I have a feeling you'll still get the same number of questions from residents. You just might be sending them those pages instead.
I don't know if
I
our
don't know.
residents are.
Yeah.
I speak to maybe not residents every day, but daily I speak to people on the ordinance.
Really?
That are working for residents, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
Realtors use it,
Yeah.
builders,
Mhm.
designers, business owners.
And who's your competition? I mean, who does what you do?
This is copyright, so nobody does this exact thing. Nobody does the organization and the buttons and the side tabs. But because it's an online code, we would say that MuniCode would be a competitor because of the ability to have it online. There are some codes that are simply someone just put on the buttons at the bottom, but they left pretty much everything intact from the old ordinance, so that's not really a competitor. E-code and American Legal is also a hosting service, but also it's not like that. And that, well, I won't talk.
Okay.
You know, what I plan to do is understand the specifics of it and then put it out to bid. I'm not sure, this could be somewhat of a sole source deal, I don't know, but have to determine everything they do and then put it out in a request for.
Well, the others would have to be familiar with our laws, with our zoning laws. They may not be.
I don't think that's necessarily true. It is nice that we have folks here that are planners that would do it. That's a nice addition. I think it's probably part of the equation when you make a decision, but I don't think so. I think they can take it and just
You think so?
take the data and essentially that's what they're going to do. They're going to take our data and just kind of rework it and transfer it back. They're not going to change the ordinances. Which I thought, that was one thing I thought was really important because there would be some real concern about that, making any changes to it.
Do you assist and coach in changing ordinances? Or no?
Like for amendments?
Mhm.
Yeah, we do amendments, we do complete rewrites. We're finishing up a rewrite right now up in Saginaw. We're just starting one in Bay City. Those are total rewrites. East Bay Township up near Traverse City. That one was just recently adopted.
Bless you.
So those are the big ones that we have going right now. We're, I think, going to be, well, we're going to be doing a clear zoning ordinance for the city of Sylvan Lake. We work with them as well. So we were doing some amendments, but we're going to be starting working on their clear zoning process too, so. Great.
Silly question, but we've been working with you guys for years.
Mhm.
Why are you just now bringing this to us? If it was something that you think we need, like, why didn't you bring it to us like 8 years ago?
I think that we discussed it when we came in as like, hey, we also, here's all the things that we do. And we do this clear zoning ordinance, we do master plans, we do all these other kinds of planning and zoning things. And it just wasn't maybe at the top of the list of things that we needed to tackle. We've been really focused, really working hard with staff on getting the development review process nailed down and locked in. And I think everybody's we're in a good spot with all of that. And it seems like the next step. Like, staff has been working really hard. We've been trying to support staff on, making applications better, making the process better, providing guidelines and graphics when we can. And then, like, what's next? What's the next thing that we can do to, like, make a big difference and an impact here?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Any?
I have a question for
Planners or-
Sandra. Sandra, this is going to be tied to building funds, couldn't it?
Yes, I believe we could use the reserve.
What is it tied to? I'm not
Building
hearing you.
funds.
We could tie the cost of this to building
Oh, what-
funds because
umbrella
this
building?
is all about building.
Right, we had pickup, I think.
So if there's a concern about the general fund, the building funds are in the general fund, but that's the nice thing.
That's a plus, because,
Plus.
again, to my original question, the few people who are building, we've got a big number of residents out there that don't do anything, and you know what I mean? So if we tied it to the building funds, it's the people who are using it.
Yeah.
I like that.
Me too.
Mhm.
Apples to apples.
Mhm.
Okay, so what's the next step with?
Well, what we thought we would do is, I need to sit down with Joe and just kind of go over, all the different things that they provide, and I want to be able to, I don't know if anybody is out there, any other companies that can provide the same sort of service. But ultimately, we have to approach you folks again, and so
Yeah.
you have to know
Thank you.
what they're doing as compared to other people and what they're doing, what the cost is, and then you have to make a decision if you think this is a good thing or not. But we thought initially, it's great to at least you can see what the possibilities could be.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you for the
Thanks.
opportunity. It was nice to visit with you folks for all of that.
Nice to see you. So moving on, the commission will consider a 2025 poverty exemption policy and guidelines and resolution to establish and adopt the 2025 City of Bloomfield Hills Poverty Exemption Policy and Guidelines.
So I think that's me. This
It
is
is.
kind of a pro forma thing that you do every year. The Michigan General Property Tax Act provides at MCL 211.7U that municipalities grant a poverty exemption with respect to property taxes for people that can't afford to pay the property taxes. One of the requirements that goes along with that is that every year the municipalities have to adopt a resolution establishing the guidelines for the next upcoming year. And you need to do that before your board of review, which takes place in March. This has been presented to you every year for many, many years. Essentially, the poverty guidelines are based on the federal poverty guidelines for the previous year. So the resolution is basically the same as you've seen every year, except the poverty guidelines are based on the 2024 federal poverty guidelines, which is required by the statute. So that's really it in a nutshell. You need to adopt the resolution because it has to be adopted before the board review, but nothing's changed except for the 2024 federal poverty guidelines are included in the resolution.
So what is considered the poverty line?
It's in here.
It's changing every year that we have to reapprove, correct?
It's based on the number of people per household.
Sure, I see it on C, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then on number 8, it says, the 100%, 75.
That is established by statute. Those are the, I guess for uniformity, the state of Michigan decided that you could grant 100%, 75%, 50%, or 25% exemption. So if you thought somebody was deserving of a poverty exemption, but maybe not 100%, not 100% exempt from the property taxes, you could grant a 25% reduction. But those numbers and those percentages are set by the state.
Set by the state, not by, okay,
Set by the state, yeah.
okay. Would someone like to make a, or is there any discussion regarding this?
No.
Would someone like to make a motion?
I move that we approve and adopt the resolution to establish and adopt the 2025 City of Bloomfield Hills Poverty Exemption Policy and Guidelines that is included in tonight's agenda packet.
Thank you. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Please signify by saying no. And the motion carries. So now we will hear an update on the planning services policy.
Thank you, Mayor. So I provided the commission with a memo that discusses some reasoning behind what we believe, I think, is making subcommittees public meetings. And essentially what it means is that we would notice for our subcommittee meetings. The cost is nothing to notice for it, but what it does is it provides, we believe it puts us in line with a recent Michigan Supreme Court case, and I believe it provides transparency to our processes, and so that's the first part of this, and so maybe we could take this in two parts. Another part of this is the actual policy. I made some changes to the administrative policy, but I know there's probably some concern or some discussion about this recommendation that was, vetted through our city attorney, and I've also talked to our city clerk, and I believe it's the right process. So maybe Dirk, you can comment on
Sure.
the reasoning.
What happened was in either October or November of 2024, the Michigan Supreme Court adopted the case of Pinewood Warren versus City of Warren. And what that case basically said was that certain subcommittees or committees could be subject to the Open Meetings Act. That there had been discussion for years as to whether the Open Meetings Act applied to subcommittees and committees. This case really narrowed the scope. That case specifically dealt with marijuana licenses, and there was a subcommittee that was established to make a recommendation to the city council in Warren as to who would be awarded the licenses. But the committee had so much influence, it did so much deliberating, that even though they didn't make the final decision, the city council did, the court said, in effect, they're really a key part of that deliberation process and are really driving ultimately what the final decision would be made by the city council. And the court said, in that kind of a scenario, a subcommittee like that does have that kind of power and influence over the ultimate decision that maybe another body's going to make. In this case, it was the city council. It's subject to the Open Meetings Act. It needs to be open to the public, have to give the appropriate notice, which Dave said is a very small cost. So when Dave and I and Amy were talking about that case and the impact on what impact it might have here, we talked about the ordinance subcommittee, we talked about the planning subcommittee, and a lot goes on at both of those subcommittees. And a lot of it is fairly weighty stuff in terms of how the planning commission might ultimately make a decision with respect to zoning ordinance uses, special land uses and the like, and how an ordinance might ultimately become enacted. So to err on the side of being conservative and to make sure that you don't unintentionally run into a violation of the Open Meetings Act, we decided that the best policy was just to simply say that if you've got a formal subcommittee or committee, that those meetings should be treated as public meetings subject to the Open Meetings Act, so that we don't run afoul of the decision that was made in Pinewood. As a member, I don't know if I'm a member, but I attend the planning subcommittee meetings and the ordinance subcommittee meetings, and again, a lot of what happens in those meetings drives ultimate decisions that are made. So by my way of thinking, you're better off treating them as subject to the Open Meetings Act and doing the notice requirements and the open to the public requirements. So that was the rationale that went into that portion of the policy.
It's my understanding that our subcommittee meetings are in no way have power over the city commission or the planning commission on what the ultimate decision would be for what their discussion.
They don't have direct
There is
power.
always discussion in those planning commission meetings, maybe
They-
too much discussion.
You're right, Mayor, they don't have direct power, but in the Pinewood case, neither did the marijuana subcommittee. The marijuana subcommittee was only making a recommendation to the city council, but the court said, yeah, they're making a recommendation, but that recommendation carries so much weight that it really is part of the deliberative process. And so, having sat through those subcommittee meetings and watched how they operate and how they work, a lot of what's is said in those meetings do have a lot of weight in terms of what ultimate decisions made. So I think to avoid unintentionally running afoul of the Open Meetings Act, the best practice is just to simply treat those as open meetings. That's my legal opinion.
I agree with that too. I mean, as an attorney myself, I feel like you have to be very conservative when it comes to abiding by laws, and we can't really control what happens in the future. There may be whole different people involved, or who knows how a meeting could evolve. You could intend not to be discussing certain things, and then it just grows out of proportion and you do start discussing things. So I think out of an abundance of caution, we should make sure that we are going to be in compliance with the law going forward as well.
Let me ask something. During a discovery, if you're having a conversation, you're trying to sort out what the ordinance is or how a decision should play out or how it would pertain to the city, isn't also that, in a lot of cases, if you're trying to learn what we should or shouldn't do, is that an example where you maybe don't want to record that because you're genuinely trying to discover or learn about a specific instance? And so if it's recorded, then that's maybe working against you, is it not?
I understand what you're saying, but the Pinewood case really focused on the amount of weight that particular subcommittee had and whether it would play heavily in the ultimate decision by the other body. So, and I understand that some feel that an open meeting inhibits frank discussion.
Right.
And there are specific exemptions under the Open Meetings Act when you can go into closed session and have those frank discussions. But all we can deal with is the cases that are out there, and Pinewood, Warren versus City of Warren, which, like I say, was decided by the Supreme Court in October or November of 2024, is out there, and so we can't ignore it.
But I don't find it parallel to our city or our city practices. And I'm a rule follower, and I'm if I'm somewhere or I'm meeting Susie at a garden club thing, and I've got Connie Salam, and so, someone brings up something, I'm in violation of this Open Meeting Act. So,
if you have less, it's sort of apples and oranges, because the general rule is if you have less than a quorum of a body and you have some discussions, it's not technically a violation of the Open Meetings Act if you have less than a quorum. But that's not what Pinewood says. What Pinewood says is if you have a committee or a subcommittee whose deliberations has significant weight on the ultimate body that's going to make the decision, in that case, the marijuana committee making a recommendation to the city council, and the city council just adopted it, that is a meeting that should be treated as an open meeting. So the $1 million question is, if you have a planning commission subcommittee and the planning commission subcommittee is driven by people that are ultimately going to be deciding the matter for the planning commission, does that subcommittee meeting and what comes out of that subcommittee meeting have significant weight on the planning commission when it makes its ultimate decision. My experience is that it does, but you may have a different take and different opinion. But again, the fact that we have differing opinions kind of takes me to my point, which is, why even put yourself in that box? Why even risk running afoul of the Open Meetings Act? Because the detriment is so much bigger than the advantage of not treating it as an open meeting.
Can't we just say it has to be an open meeting if it's gonna have heavy weight on the decision?
But we don't ever, Dirk, I mean, use the example of last week. I've been in a lot of subcommittee meetings, and I don't, maybe I'm wrong, but we've never made any determination. We just talked to the applicant and talked about, what when they come in front of the planning, their zoning, that, what the things were. I mean, we didn't make a decision. The applicant even came to us and he goes, "What do I do next?" And we said, "Nothing. You just take what we gave you, your feedback, and decide what you're going to do." And ultimately, they come in front of us. But even if they came in front of us, like the one from last week, we don't talk about the subcommittee. We just.
But let me give you a hypothetical, and I agree with what you say because I was at the same meeting that you were. What do you think would happen if that applicant ignored everything that they were told at the subcommittee meeting? And what do you think would happen at the planning commission meeting? My guess is the planning commission would say, well, at the subcommittee we told you all these things and you didn't do any of them. And again, right, wrong, or otherwise, when I balance that against what the Supreme Court said in Pinewood, I just don't want the city to get itself in a box where somebody's going to say it is analogous to what happened with that marijuana subcommittee, because there is a lot of weight that comes out of those meetings and a lot of deliberations that are going to be taken into consideration at the ultimate meeting. So again, when I'm dealing with the Open Meetings Act, I always give an opinion that errs on the side of being conservative, and I think there isn't a lot of detriment to having an open meeting in that scenario. That's just my opinion.
Then what becomes defined as an open meeting? If I talk to Susie on the side or Lauren on the side, Mayor Lauren, is that construed as a subcommittee or a meeting, or?
No,
because I'm fearful of what's the definition and then what constitutes a meeting or subcommittee, and it seems really onerous.
There's a couple of ways that you can look at it. Obviously, if you have a quorum or more, that's a public meeting. That's an easy one.
Which we abided by before.
Right.
Do you mind standing up, because I just can't
no.
see.
Not a problem. So if you have a quorum or more, that's an open meeting, and that's an
Right.
easy one. In my opinion, if you have an established committee, that established committee should be subject to the Open Meetings Act.
What do you mean by established? Because
Something
it's
that's
the right of the head of zoning or the head of planning
something.
to always name who is going to be on those committees, and I don't think they ever have
But
the
under-
same people on
But
them.
under our planning policy, we do have, as I recall, and we have established planning.
Well, actually under the bylaws, this policy was created from the bylaws. So the bylaws state that the planning chair can create a subcommittee meeting and choose those persons.
And they
that are in
change
that.
all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they would
There's
never have
an
a quorum.
established group that
Yeah,
is
we
the
never-
subcommittee. Whereas the difference is the
established.
marijuana one, it was the same established group that always dictated whether those retail shops were awarded a license or not. Whereas,
Yeah, we
you
always
know,
change.
it's always different with us. It's not anyone established.
You know what I was thinking is what I was thinking is we published for a open meeting for this last subcommittee meeting that we had. Didn't cost us a penny. You have to do it 18 hours before. Nobody was there from the public, and so I always say, does it hurt or does it help? So it certainly can lead towards helping much more than hurting. I don't know.
It just seems like government overreach and
I actually like Commissioner Fisher's concerns, and I didn't think about that, but unless it's Open Meetings Act for defined subcommittees, but I too, I mean, he lives in my neighborhood. I see him walking all the time, so we can't talk? We're gonna keep
No,
on
we
walking by?
can't.
And you can't, and I want to finish that thought, because I think it is important. And when I said established committee, I mean just that. So if you're walking and David's walking and you start talking about a case, that's not a violation of the Open Meetings Act. If the planning chair appoints a subcommittee based on a particular case and picks 3 people, doesn't have to be, they could be, you know, a CBA member or David or you, that's an established committee, and that should be subject to the Open Meetings Act. Doesn't mean an informal gathering of less
Even though
than
you
a
don't have
quorum.
quorum and you don't,
The quorum's only,
different
the
people.
quorum's only a piece of it. The quorum is one way that you can violate the Open Meetings Act. Now the Supreme Court has come up in the Pinewood Warren versus City of Warren case with another way that is not quorum-based. So, again, you know, if, and I don't know what goes on, you know, behind closed doors, but.
nothing, I mean, we're very
Right,
transparent.
But if the planning chairman or the ZBA chairman or the mayor is establishing a committee to talk about an issue, that should be in the open. If it's an informal kind of a thing, like Susan was talking about, or David, I agree 100%. That as long as you two aren't a quorum, there's, you know, no harm, no foul.
So a quorum is for like on the planning commission,
It'd
well,
it'd
on
be
the city
5.
commission, it would be 3.
It'd be 3 the city commission, 5 the planning commission. Because there's 9 planning commissioners, so that'd be 5.
So there'd be 5 for the plan, but the city commission,
Would be 3.
there would be 3.
I guess the only thing I'm trying to protect for is there are, I mean, I haven't had an occasion yet, but I gotta imagine there is an occasion where you wanna have an off, an unofficial, that's not the right word, you wanna have a meeting, a sidebar meeting to kinda understand the topic. And if you have 3 people within this group together, you would, under what you're describing, you wanna video that or record that.
No, it wouldn't have to be video recorded. It'd have to be
documented.
It'd have to be open to the public.
I guess that was my question is.
There are examples when you
notes
don't wanna
taken?
have that
Are there meeting
public
notes that have to be taken, or is it just a open meeting?
No, there should be some sort of notes taken, but
See, that's what you're getting into this onerous. Does there have to be a lawyer present? Does there have to be,
No,
there has to be a city person present? Does there
Well-
have to be?
Wouldn't, Amy, you just do, like you, isn't that the way you would normally do it, just regular minutes? I mean, you just write some minutes up afterwards. You don't, it wouldn't be recorded or anything, would it?
So I believe it was the December meeting, there was a planning commission meeting, and then there was a planning commission subcommittee meeting that was an open meeting because there was a quorum at that meeting. So I noticed for the meeting, I took the minutes. You probably noticed that minutes tend to be, as they should be, action only. So the requirements for Open Meetings Act is that you record the date, the time, who was present, who was absent, and any action that was taken. So the minutes of that planning commission subcommittee are very simple because there was no action taken, there was no motion taken, but it was a record of the open meeting. That's all that.
And that's what we would be, that's all we would be required to do going forward for subcommittees.
right.
The same thing.
Right.
not-
What about attendance?
I
I
understand.
under the impression that you wanted to have in your administrative thing, you wanted to make sure there's a city person there, a lawyer there, so we're covered.
Well, so it just depends. So when we have ordinance subcommittee meetings, we don't have to have the engineer there, zoning ordinance. We may or may not need a planning person there, but it is helpful at times to have a planning person there. We certainly would need the city attorney because he's the one that's writing all this down. He's taking all the notes and he's the one that's, that's
Drafting it also.
drafting the ordinance. So we have to have that there, but it just depends. If you have a subcommittee meeting about a commercial building, well, there's a letter written by the engineer, there's a letter written by by our planners, and maybe in that case, we might not need an attorney in that case. Probably not, but we certainly need our consultants because it's efficient to have them there and answer questions about their letters. And I think those subcommittees are designed or should be designed to help the applicant understand.
Absolutely.
And so when you have an open meeting, you don't have to worry about, you're not excluding, you're making decisions like, well, we're not gonna have the property owner here, we're not gonna have that person here. But that doesn't make any sense because they should be there so they can hear all the comments. Otherwise, we gotta write all the comments down and try to relay it back to them. It was really beneficial, I thought, in this last subcommittee meeting that the representative of the property owner for that building was there because he heard all the comments, and you're right, at the end, he said, what do I do here? I says, well, are you willing to shrink the building down? Are you willing to do this? Are you willing to do that? And he said, well, I'll go back to the drawing board. But to Dirk's point,
Well, I support that you had an open meeting for that.
Yeah.
Because you had the lawyers there, you had the planners there, you had,
yeah,
that to me is different than fact-finding subcommittee meetings or, when you're just getting the outline together for an ordinance. I don't want taxpayer money going to the lawyers, the planners, the blah, 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 every single time we meet. I
I hear your
it seems
concern.
cumbersome to
I hear your
me and
concern.
expensive.
And I agree with you. There's, I think in a ordinance subcommittee meeting, we have to have the attorney there because he has to write the notes, he's got to draft it. We don't
Not
necessarily.
always, it's not always in a drafting stage.
Well, no.
I mean, why would the attorney write the notes? I would think that's more of Amy's city clerk, right?
Well, Dirk drafts all our ordinances.
I just find the more people that have to be there, the more difficult it is to plan, and things take longer, and it's gonna be 6 months 3 months before you can get all these people. And
Well, I don't think this changes any of the structure of the subcommittee meetings it's not gonna change
right,
anything.
if it's a quorum, you absolutely have an open meeting. If it's gonna be a decision-making situation, I think you absolutely should have an open meeting. But I don't think absolutely every meeting of anyone on our committee or planning should be have to be an open
Well,
meeting.
I guess what I'm saying is, just because now it's an open meeting, doesn't really change who attends the meeting.
No.
That's gonna remain the same whether it's open or not.
Correct.
Right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, no one's gonna show up to these meetings. It's just
Not
protecting us.
necessarily.
Well, I mean staff and,
Yeah,
that's gonna be the same whether it was open or not, whether the subcommittee meeting was an open meeting or not an open meeting. You're still gonna have the same people involved
Right.
that you need to have involved to make appropriate decisions.
yes.
I guess I'm just a little sensitive to adding another layer, only as you read through this. There are a lot of layers, there are a lot of people, there are a lot of, surveyors, zoning, planning, building. A lot of people step through this process
Yeah.
before we get to what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure we need to take another layer, add another layer onto this. Because for the most part, all decisions are made in a public forum. I mean,
Yeah.
90+%, right?
100% are
We're
made.
really trying to make a
100%.
rule for that 5, 8, 10%?
We're trying to make a rule to make sure that you don't establish committees where decisions are ultimately going to be driven by the decision or the recommendation or the things that get said by that subcommittee.
Is there an
That's based
But I
on,
think we've absolutely never done that. I mean,
We've
I guess
never-
not that I know.
and it's
I guess
always
my-
been
my-
vetted in every.
My one
public
question
meeting.
would be, is there an example in the last 12 months or 24 months where we've done that?
Or 10 years even.
well, I mean, the example would be the ordinance subcommittee and in the planning subcommittee, because they were not always open to the public, if you recall. I mean, that's a relatively new thing that in
Yes.
fact, the planning subcommittee meeting that we just had might, and correct me if I'm wrong, might have been the first one that we noticed as an open meeting. So, that's, and I don't think there's any doubt at least no doubt in my mind, that what happens at least at that planning subcommittee meeting does have weight on the ultimate decision.
It does.
Now, other committees that maybe I'm not aware of, maybe don't, but.
So maybe that's the problem, is it's too blanket. All meetings of 2 or 3 people have to be an open meeting, and maybe you
Well, we only
need to
have
more specify if it's,
We only have ordinance subcommittees and
Planning subcommittee.
planning subcommittee for a commercial building. This is sort of it's kind of a non-issue because there's not a lot of these meetings, but it's a protective issue for the city. essentially what it is.
I guess that my last thought is, what are we solving for? And it's really Warren. City of Warren had an incident that got out of control, right?
No, well, if you read that opinion, and it's like, I'm reading that thick, it's a thick opinion. But if you read it, what they don't want decisions that are going to drive the ultimate decision to be made in closed sessions. That's what that case is really getting at. And yet, it does deal with the marijuana subcommittee in the context of marijuana licensing, but the case isn't couched that way.
Right, so why can't we just say, if your meeting is going to drive the final decision, then it has to be an open meeting?
I think it's
Otherwise, if it's just informational or it's whatever, it doesn't have to be.
it's and Al's kind of hit on it. They meld together, and it's what if I'm in court and I'm arguing, well, we didn't know that that's the direction it was going to go in, and that's why we didn't notice it, but that's the direction it went in. That's not a, you're going to have a hard time with that, winning that case. If they're going to say, counsel, have you read the Pinewood case, and do you understand what it says, and do you understand that it doesn't have to be the decision-making committee? You know, so to err on the side of caution. Now, again, you know, and I understand what David is saying. You know, David and Susan are walking down Rudgate or wherever and chatting, and they talk about a case. Well, no, you don't need an open meeting for that. Forgetting the quorum aspect of it, but if you have a chairman of the ZBA or a chairman of the planning commission or a chairman of the mayor actually appointing a committee, my opinion is it should be subject to the Open Meetings Act. If you do something less formal than that and there's no quorum, then yeah, I don't have an issue with it. But if you actually establish, if you call it a committee and you establish a committee, it should be subject to the Open Meetings
I
Act.
can't see this be for any other reason than a planning subcommittee.
I just don't want it to be, I think it's broad too, and I'm siding with David here is, you know, I don't want it being thrown in our faces that we have, 2 restaurants in this community. And so if David is at Bill's and Lauren's at Bill's and I'm at Bill's, we're all gonna stay in different corners. Don't look at me, because, you know, it's gonna get, I don't want that ever blown.
We don't
Has to
want
be-
whispering about
I
us,
understand.
because
Yeah.
There is an exception in the Open Meetings Act
or
for
challenges or.
social gatherings and or chance encounters.
That's not.
So that would be protected. That would be backed out of that.
Amy, she has her hand up.
So as I'm taking everyone's thoughts and I listen, this Open Meetings Act obviously is very close to my job. Noticing for a public meeting, noticing for an open meeting, is erring on the side of caution. And to Commissioner Fisher's point about, are there occasions where sometimes you don't want to speak about things in a public meeting? The occasion that would come up converse to the occasion where you could have a situation where a subcommittee was not noticed for open meetings and you have a violation of the Open Meetings Act. The exposure to the city for having a violation of the Open Meetings Act, in my opinion, is far greater than the opportunity of perhaps having to speak about something that you may not want to speak about in public. One is clearly a greater exposure to the city than the other. And it's that simple that I see it.
Yeah.
So, for instance.
How do you notify?
Yeah,
Sorry, how do you notify?
So the act requires notification on the city website. It requires notification on the public board here at City Hall. So there are 2 places I put it on the website, and there are 2 public boards I put it here, and it's required to be there 18 hours before the meeting.
So for every small committee meeting that we have, and we say this is an open meeting, you're going to post it.
Is it
I-
that, or
I
is that
believe
a
that's
subcommittee, a formalized subcommittee?
To me, and again, I didn't know that there were other subcommittees or committees besides
I don't know of any other.
planning committee and
Subcommittees.
the ordinance subcommittee. If there are, then it depends what those subcommittees do,
Well, like,
but
Sandra just sent out a notice and we're gonna have a budget meeting.
a meeting, yeah, that's different.
That's not,
Is that do we have to post that
No.
as an open meeting?
Or
Yeah, we do.
a budget meeting of the whole city commission?
Yeah, that's
Well,
an
certainly,
open
yeah.
meeting. We do always post for that.
Of
Okay,
course,
you already
if it's the whole city commission, sure, of course.
so if there is a If there is, well, no, what I'm getting at is, if there is a formal subcommittee formed to review a specific thing, it's under that circumstance that you would have it,
Yes.
which.
That's it.
So if it's not,
Yes.
if it's not
That's it.
formally called a subcommittee, and you're meeting independently,
Right,
we're fine.
yeah.
Fine.
There's not a,
As long as,
Mostly you
as
can
long
do
as you don't
what you
have a quorum, you're fine.
and the quorum being no more than three,
No more than 3. No, you can't have 3 or more.
3 or more. or
Of-
less-
of the
less than
city
3.
commission.
Okay.
Oh, the Senate Commission, yeah.
The planning commission would be 5.
But that's separate from this, that's always been that way about the open meetings.
Yeah, we've always been very careful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's
the
more than
quorum is
3.
what everybody always looked at,
Right.
but now there's a new wrinkle based on that Supreme Court case.
This is just for the handful of these things that happen here, there's not that many of them, but it's a safe thing for the city, I mean.
But I think
Can
if
I be
it's
clear
something-
that we
If it's-
don't,
if it's
aren't
deemed a
required to always
subcommittee,
hire
then you do it.
a lawyer, have a
Yes,
city person
yes,
there, always
yes.
have some,
Yes,
you know, bartering.
absolutely,
I
we can
mean,
we
I
can be
just
cognizant
don't
of who's
wanna
there.
handcuff our chair of our planning commission or zoning, and that he has to always have, you know, one of us hired to, one of, you know.
Well, I mean, I
I'd like
would-
to keep the flexibility that he has to inform people and discuss an
Yeah.
ordinance or whatever.
And he
without-
can always do that on a one-to-one basis too, you know.
Well, I mean, the only thing I would ask is that you would trust that you know, if we have an ordinance subcommittee and I believe our city attorney's gotta be there because he's the one who has to draft it, I would hope that you would trust that I can make that decision. And if we don't need, you know, certain consultants there because we're not really addressing anything, any letters that they wrote or whatever, yeah, that's not a problem if you're concerned about having too many people there.
In fact, there are often times, not subcommittee meetings, but you've had city commission meetings where you haven't had me present, so. I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
I think when we're talking about the police chief and,
Yeah, because it does cost us, you
Right.
know, so
Budget
people ask me,
meetings.
do you want me in this meeting? I'll say, I don't think we need you, so.
Well, and it also takes a lot more time to plan it and get everyone's calendar together
Yeah, true,
and it
Very
just will delay everything.
true.
okay, thank
Okay.
you, thanks.
And it is gonna stay that the subcommittee chairs of zoning or planning name who's in the subcommittee.
Yes,
That is staying,
yeah,
right?
I mean, the only thing in an ordinance or in the code that the city manager would be there, so I would be there. And I would hope that you would give me the, you know,
Oh, yeah.
the respect I need to choose who I believe would be, you know, yeah, go ahead, Amy.
I was just gonna mention that if it's a public meeting, you also have to have a secretary, and that is my responsibility. So just to be clear, any open meeting, I would have to be at the
Yeah.
minutes of that meeting. I want to make.
You're always there anyway.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you're kind of given, Amy.
So we can't appoint someone at the meeting to be the secretary. The secretary of the city has to be at every single subcommittee meeting?
Yeah, she always is.
I mean, you have more experience with these subcommittees, so,
Amy's always been there,
great.
yeah, yeah, she's always been there.
Okay.
Now, Dirk is sometimes, but not always.
Right, exactly.
Um,
Sometimes not always.
and mostly these subcommittee meetings, you know, you gotta remember the definition of them. They're appointed by the chair of the planning, the mayor, and the chair of the, zoning. And it's normally when it's a big project that has multiple issues or things that are going on that there's no way you could sit in a planning commission meeting to, for instance, the Martell and,
Right, you'd want to have a
Dunstan
meeting
Court.
before the meeting.
yeah, you wanna have
Right,
a
we
meeting
don't wanna
before the
waste
meeting to kind
time.
of get through some of these things. And then, that's good, and then it comes to the planning commission. But never have I ever heard us say, well, we approved this at the zoning or the planning subcommittee. We've never done that.
Ever. That's why
They have always just.
I don't think it's apples and apples.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the question here.
It's
This
not
is
the
just
question.
this is
Oh.
just a precaution
Yeah.
to avoid getting into a legal snare. It's
Yeah.
not gonna change anything about the way that you
Yeah.
carry out your meetings.
Yeah, I think that's.
Or
fine.
the ability to have them
Right.
with flexibility and
No,
nimbleness.
It shouldn't affect it at all.
I,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, I would agree. I agree with, Mayor, though. I think we should just watch
I
on
want to get mired
expenses
in,
for things. Yeah, okay.
Because I think this whole commission and everybody's always above board, and there's not been, everyone is very admirably ethical, and so I don't even like to infer that we wouldn't be, or that we would be
Oh,
don't
don't get me wrong, I was not inferring that by any stretch of the imagination. But this case did come down in October or November of last year, and David and Amy and I thought it was important that we have some discussion of it with the city commission. No, I've never had an experience where I felt anything other than completely above board and of the highest ethics with this commission.
Thank you.
Okay.
Just want to make sure that was not inferred from this.
So I had I've changed a couple of things, just so you know, this policy was developed in 2022 and was provided to the city commission back then. So this is not a new policy. This is something that's been in place. And I do create a lot of policies. I mean, to be honest with you, it's how we run the organization. And I get that experience from, as Chief King knows, this is how we develop things and how we run organizations. A lot of policy. And it really, what it really does is just help everybody understand what their roles are and the expectations. Because I forget, to be honest with you, how all this stuff works. So I know that even working with the planning commission and planning chair at times, you know, hey, how does this work and how's it gonna work? And so it's just nice to have this stuff laid out. But looking at the policy, I saw a couple things that were concerning to me. And so I you know, made some changes. So the reason I'm bringing it up, because they are tied to the planning commission, so I don't want to cause any, you know, concern by anybody or any consternation.
Did you review this with the chair of planning commission and zoning?
No.
And it directly affects him, right? And the way they're,
Well, I mean.
it's all about the planning commission, correct?
Well, so some of this stuff was recommended by the planning chair, to be honest with you, but I see how it's impactful to daily operations of the city, and I don't agree with some of it. So that's why I made some changes. So I don't know how you guys want to go through this, but essentially,
Dave, if I was part of this, so just a little bit of history. I was part of this in 2022. I don't know if you remember. It was Sarah, myself, Will Hassler, Walt, and you, I think it was, if I can remember right. And we did have a subcommittee meeting before we brought it before the commission. We had a subcommittee meeting in the back room. So I can't believe that was.
So why hasn't this been in front of a
Yeah.
subcommittee meeting before coming before the city commission?
well, the reason why this is in front of the subcommittee meeting, because this was a big deal. It was a big deal to understand everybody's role, what the planning commissioner's roles were, what the city's city manager and the city administration's roles were. We had actually the city attorney opine on that and write a memo using our city code to lay out all the facts. And this was put through a subcommittee, to be honest with you, just so everybody understood it. And I think it worked out pretty well. But the whole idea behind it was just what I said before, is to really write everything down in a policy that lets everybody know what the roles are, how it all works. But the majority of this policy really has to do with my administration. It doesn't really have to do with anything else. And so it helps our planners understand what their roles are. It helps our consultants understand what their roles are. And the changes that I made really were some changes that I had some concerns about, and I'd like to go over them with you. One thing is that I have concern about is, and we've actually modified this in the city commission, is how we treat our city attorney and his opinion. Because the city attorney is the person that will litigate any disagreements on the zoning code verbiage and what it means. So we actually have a policy that was approved by the city commission that when you want to revise a zoning ordinance or city code, you have to go through a process. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew when we're in these meetings that when ordinance language interpretation needs to happen, Dirk is somewhat the final arbiter in that, because he has to be able to take our current ordinance language and say, this means that this is a white piece of paper. If someone thinks it's a black piece of paper, based upon that ordinance language, then they have to go through the process of making that change. And that can happen, because the city commission may think that an ordinance means one thing, or a planning commissioner may think that ordinance means one thing, or the staff can think that the ordinance means one thing. But that's why we call Dirk. And we say, Dirk, does this ordinance mean this is a white piece of paper or a black piece of paper? And he'll tell us if it's a white piece of paper or a black piece of paper. And we have to go along with this. And I could say to Dirk, well, I don't think so. I think it means this. And he'll say, well, I disagree. But we can change it to that if you'd like. And to change that, we have to go through a process. So that's essentially what this change is. Because if you read the old ordinance, it's sort of this talking back and forth and debating back and forth. And that doesn't do anybody any good. There should be a process, and we develop a process through the city commission that there's an ordinance change process. And that, what that does is that opens up the whole discussion to the full commission. It should be the full commission's decision if they need to change the ordinance or not. And that it's at that time that our city attorney can say, this is what the ordinance language says, this is how I interpret it. If you guys want to change it, then we can go through the process. So that's essentially what this first component of this change is.
Can you tell me where the verbiage is that you changed?
Section 5, subsection B.
Oh, B, okay.
Summarize.
Because I have completely so much respect for Dirk, and I'm sure Mark, you will be as well, but we have not even worked with Mark yet.
Yeah.
And Mark has not worked with our ordinances yet. And I completely respect Dirk's recommendation, and I'm sure everything's gonna be great, but to say that the new attorney is gonna override everything the city commissioners who are,
It's not overriding what the city commissioners.
would like, it feels like this, I don't know, it doesn't.
That's not the case, though. I mean, so the old ordinance stated that if a city staff member, consultant, or board or commission member disagrees with the city attorney's analysis or opinion, the issue should try to be resolved with the city attorney before bringing the matter to a subcommittee, board, or full commission to debate in a public meeting. The problem is sometimes in some of these meetings and you know, Dirk, you may want to admit to it or not, but there's been debate with Dirk over ordinance language in committees, in meetings. If there's a disagreement to ordinance interpretation that is not resolved, the city manager will advise the planning chair and mayor of any disagreements involving planning commission agenda items. So, but there's no resolution to that. That's just sort of up in the air, and it doesn't include the full city commission. My change to the policy says that the city attorney's opinion on ordinance interpretation is the opinion of the city. If the city staff member, consultant, board, or commission member disagrees with the city attorney's analysis or opinion, the issue will be addressed through the ordinance review process under the city policy 24-03. That policy was developed so that everybody here on at this dais can have a say in how that works, and that's how it should work. And with the city commission, the full public body should have a say if that ordinance should be changed or not, or if Dirk's interpretation is wrong, or they believe it's wrong or not, and there should be a discussion. He should be able to talk about it, and then he should make some changes to the ordinance. That is just kind of, you know, how.
So is this only with
just
ordinances, or
yeah,
is it with every opinion?
No, it's just the ordinance.
Ordinance interpretation.
Or it's just ordinance interpretation. It's just closing the loop of a policy that we already have in place.
Yeah.
And I think it's the right thing to do.
I think it's a good idea to have it clear who's got the final word, because if other people are saying this, that, and the other, the attorney, the person that we've hired as our attorney to provide us with legal advice should have the final say unless it gets resolved in the manner that it's stated here.
So we deal with this all the
The
time.
lawyer should make sure it's a legal,
Well, it's an
appropriate
ordinance.
thing, but I
It's
think
an
the city
ordinance.
commissioners and the city planners should decide what is the content of the ordinance, not a lawyer that we hire.
Well, no,
That is
so
new to our
here's a good
city.
example. I'll give you a good example. Right now, I'm dealing with a zoning, a land ordinance issue. And, you know, our consultants may see it one way. Our building department person might see it another way. Amy may see it one way. And the folks that are asking us the question may see it one way. We have to be able to go to somebody that lets us know what he believes that this ordinance means, the ordinance language means. And that's the way that's how we run things in this city. That's actually how we do things.
Well, I respect that he is the one to interpret the ordinance.
So if you take that word,
This one.
and it's interpretation, that's it.
So it's not making up the ordinance.
No, no, no.
I
It's
agree
just,
with what Dave's saying.
it's just interpretation, so
Right, he's interpreting the
Yes.
rule or
The
law.
law.
that's
And
all,
he's-
that's all this is.
And he's providing us with legal
Right.
advice, which
If we
is what
disagree,
we're
Lauren,
asking.
Which is
we
what
would
I
have
want
to
him to do,
debate it.
not
If you disagree, it
to
comes
make
back
the
to you
policy.
and you.
Right.
Yes, but it
Right.
comes back to the full body, so
Right.
there are
Okay.
times, yeah, when,
But I don't read this way. That's why, I mean,
That's what's wrong
I
with
feel
it.
like, I
What-
understand what you're trying to do, and I think this is good, and we should do it. But when I think it can be finessed a little bit more, some of these, so that I feel like we'll be here until midnight on some of these issues. I would strongly, and I have to tell you, if Walt, who is the chairperson of the planning commission, and this directly affects him, I feel like he should be have to be able to weigh in on it, to know it first before we pass anything, because then we're being dictators and we're going, well, this is the way things are gonna go. And I don't know if we should really
I think
do
we need to
that.
respect his opinion and his
well,
history.
he doesn't he's not the interpreter of the ordinance. That is the problem here.
He's the head of the planning
He's the
He
commission.
head.
doesn't interpret,
He's not the city attorney.
he is not the interpreter of the ordinance.
Right.
But he has to have the right to question it, and
No,
He
he has the
just-
right.
He can
He has
question
the
it, but
right
He has the
it's
right.
not his interpretation of the ordinance.
But I think what Commissioner is saying, that this does not say what you're telling us.
Well, I can read
I
it.
mean, it doesn't read the way.
Yeah, it
And I
doesn't.
think we need to table this and have a subcommittee meeting with the people that it affects
Well,
and get the verbiage
Well,
such that everybody's
I
comfortable with it.
mean, this here, I mean, I'll do whatever the full commission wants to do, but this says the city attorney's opinion on ordinance interpretation is the opinion of the city. If anybody disagrees with that and they want to change it, then they can go through the process. That's all this says.
Yeah.
I don't know if we need a subcommittee to change that.
No, I see it as Dave is describing it.
I do, but
Well, no, but just.
I have a lot of respect for Walt. He has done a lot for
Why,
this
I
city.
No, but I guess to repeat what David's saying is that, if there is a disagreement, who's the referee? We're asking Dirk to be the referee.
That's it.
And if we then don't like.
It won't be Dirk,
if-
it'll be Mark, and
Yeah,
all due respect, Mark is very new to our city. As of
Well-
March, he'll be new, he's not even,
and
Well, we need to designate somebody, council, right?
right.
But
So. And
I
then
don't-
if we find that we don't like it, then we can debate whether or not we wanna change it. But in terms of interpretation, we should look to our council, right?
Yes, I see that rationale.
I see the rationale, but I don't want it thrown in Walt's face. We have a process, you can't do this now, it's what, the city
It's
attorney.
not the
That's not what this is doing. I'm sorry you feel that way. That's
Yeah.
not what this is doing.
I do too, I feel the same way.
I feel,
That's
This
he's,
affects him so strongly,
It
and the whole
does.
processes that,
What,
I don't know
what-
why he wasn't-
What part affects him?
because you're specifically, you said, you're calling out where people will debate Dirk's opinion, and I know Walt's done that. Haven't been in the planning commission for a couple of years and just started back.
Debating's fine as long as he says, as long as nobody says in a public meeting, I disagree with you, this is what the ordinance says. That's a problem for all of us as one team, one city. It just is. Dirk?
It's a problem. Could we finesse the word, something to say that if there's substantial disagreement as to the city attorney's opinion, that it would go to the city commission for discussion and decision? Would something like that
I mean,
Same thing, yeah.
I don't wanna just call out, but I've been in meetings before, and it can tell you it was the Cranbrook one, is that, you know, Will Hostler is an attorney, and Will Hostler has said, I don't agree with you. You know, I mean,
Happens all the time.
happens all the time. It's not just
And there were
law.
things that were caught as well that were different in terms of,
But I
Just
think,
the final arbiters, that's all I'm
but
saying.
I think the point here though is not constraining anyone. It's about, well, how do we move on from this disagreement? That's the question.
Yes.
And
That's exactly right.
we don't have a process to do that unless we make this change. Otherwise,
maybe
we're-
this change just needs to be reworded.
I think it needs to be reworded. Dirk, I liked your
Because I
suggestion on
think that's what
rewording
we're
it.
trying to get to, is that ultimately, if the city commission disagrees with what my opinion is, and I don't wanna put it in terms of Walt versus Dirk, it's not like that,
Yeah.
but if there's a substantial disagreement with, somebody's gotta make the final call. But at the end of the day, you're the city commission. If you don't like the final call, I think you debate it and you
Right.
decide, you know.
We have a policy for that.
Right.
Right.
And I think that maybe the commission's having some difficulty, maybe if it's stated that a little more. I know what you're saying, Dave. You're saying that addressed through the ordinance review process, which ultimately would get to the city commission.
Yes.
But maybe you could clarify that a little
But
bit.
we're all human, and I mean, there have been times like the Dietrich Burrs thing where we were gonna give them, you know, the ability to rezone it, and it was a good thing that we didn't,
Yeah.
because all those residents behind there were very upset about another building stretching back that way, so,
Mhm.
you know, it's
Challenges
been
are good.
examples
Yeah,
that
there
are-
have been.
not,
Mhm. I think challenges are good. I do. It's, in the end, the idea is you're coming together and you're both, you know, coming to a conclusion that I don't know. I mean, Dave, here we go.
Well,
I
agree.
disagree with the fact that it's a problem when someone challenges it.
That's what I'm saying.
No,
Everybody
when it
should
can't
have
be
it.
resolved is what David's saying.
But they've all been
This
resolved.
course is
Well, right.
important.
yeah, when has it not been resolved?
Yeah, they've all been
This
resolved.
course is
It's not like we
important.
never.
But, well, I think this course is important, but I think if everybody knows that we have a policy, that's all I'm saying. And we do have a policy that's already in place.
We had one,
This course is important, I understand that, you know, communication and talking about everything's a great thing. And we're doing it right now, but, I can strike the whole thing from here.
I like how it's
to be
written
honest with you,
already.
But I think it's important.
Yeah, I like how it's written already in B47. I mean, we put a lot of thought into that.
Well, we didn't have that policy in place because what happened was, you know, we were going through some ordinance changes, and I think the full commission just wanted to all be here when we did that, so we made that change. But, you know, if you, this is really just, you know, a policy to help me run things, but I don't think it really affects.
I think this scenario, again, it shouldn't be personal.
It's not personal.
No, I know it's not, Dave. It shouldn't be personal as to people, but what happens if you do have, if the planning chair and the city attorney disagree, what happens then? Whose opinion do you go with? And if you have a policy that says you go with this opinion, unless, you know, it can go through the process and come to the city commission can make can break the tie, is that maybe a better way of saying it?
well, can we make that kind of change after we've gotten comfortable with the new attorney for 6
Yeah.
months? I mean,
Yeah,
I don't even,
I
that's
really.
putting the
Well-
final say for everything in a new attorney's
It's
hands.
just ordinance
that we have no.
interpretation, it's not.
well, it's not really the final say, because if we still disagree, it
You
comes
could
back
still
to
change it.
it comes back to the commission, and if the
Right.
commission changes it, rewords it, whatever is necessary to get to the result that you are happy with, it's just a process for resolution. It's not giving anyone
Right.
That's
more or
But-
less power.
So let me
That's
play this
all.
out,
I think it is.
so I understand this. We're in a planning commission meeting, and you and I, we'll just use me. You and I interpret it wrong, you interpret it this way, and we're gonna say, well, we have a process for this, we have to go into this, you know, ordinance review, so we have to tell the applicant, we gotta go follow this other
No,
step. I
no.
don't understand this.
No,
How are you,
that's not the
we
case.
have never not resolved anything in a meeting. Okay, the meeting goes a little bit long and sometimes, but in the end, it comes out with a better outcome.
Or sometimes somebody just backs off their opinion. I mean, being honest, that's oftentimes. There have been circumstances where we have had some serious disagreements about how an ordinance is interpreted and what it means, and it's caused us some distress. I don't know if you remember the planning commission or ZBA, which one went first?
Yes.
Um,
And there are.
And I mean, I'll just say it, at the end of the day, I backed off my opinion. Which is fine, and we got through it, but if you have a process in place, and you can't resolve that, and nobody backs off their opinion, then at least under what's being proposed here, it would go to the city commission. The city commission would say, no, we think this is how it should go, and on you go with your business. So you're right. I mean, in a meeting, we've always managed to work our way through things, but it's not always the case that happens.
So again, tell me the process, if we go with this, and there is a, you don't back down and whoever on the planning commission doesn't back down, then what is the process to resolve it?
The process would be to go through the ordinance amendment process, which ultimately, as I understand it, David, correct me if I'm wrong, would end up before the city commission to make the final decision how you wanted to interpret it. And maybe the decision is, it's ambiguous, but we can fix it by adding this because this is what we think it means.
You gotta
But
remember this.
again, what are you gonna do with that person sitting in front of you, the applicant?
We can work through that, but you gotta remember this impacts everybody here. It impacts everybody sitting in here. And if our ordinance is not, if we don't understand, if our city attorney believes that the language is saying one thing, his interpretation is one thing, and somehow it's just kind of left out there that that's not the truth, it's unfair to everybody. It's unfair to our staff, it's unfair to our consultants, it's unfair to our city attorney, it's unfair to me. If this is just a process, if whoever's sitting in these seats, whether it's me or whoever, that if there's a disagreement about how our current city attorney interprets the current city ordinance and the zoning ordinance and both the city code, that there's a process that you go to the city commission and say, I think this guy's wrong, and I think this person's wrong, I think this is what it means, because we owe it to everybody. We owe it to everybody to understand and plus our city attorney is the one that litigates this stuff for us. This is actually a very important thing. I know it doesn't sound it, but it's really important that we have this person that as the final arbiter at that time with what this ordinance language means. It can always be changed. There's a process for it, and that's why we developed that process.
And that really is the key date, is at that time.
Yes.
Because it could ultimately end up back before the city commissions, they could say, Dirk, you're all wet.
Right.
We don't think maybe that's what it reads,
Yeah, but
but we don't think that's what it means, and we're gonna change it, so.
I don't see, because we want to get it resolved for the resident, and I can't imagine tabling, I don't know.
I don't know if
That's a
is that a
table.
concern, Amy?
So I hear the focus from Commissioner McCarthy on we want to resolve it at the planning commission at the time that it's happening. And I will go back to a comment you said earlier. Yes, all of those instances have been resolved at a meeting, but there are ordinance interpretations, attorney opinions on, as Dave said, for every one of us on several occasions that are not just planning or zoning related items. It's a matter of having the city attorney who you've hired for his expertise and who's going to be your litigator to be the final voice. If there is a decision that Dirk takes a position on an ordinance and then it comes back to the city commission, and I mean, I'm repeating myself, but there is a process, which I believe was Commissioner Buckley who wanted the ordinance policy. So there's all of these things in place that are safeguards so that the city commission, it is your final decision on what the ordinance is. That's the very bottom, is the city commission is the foundation for what the ordinance is.
That's it.
I'm strongly, I'm sure you're a very good attorney. We haven't worked with you, we don't know him, I don't see there's anything wrong. This other policy has been here since '22, is give us 6 months, let us look at this, let us see how this works out. I would also like, that we give Walt and Will, because they're chair and co-chair of the planning commission now, I
Well-
think we owe them to be able to look at this, understand it, and give us their feedback. Doesn't have to be a subcommittee, but I do think they need to review it.
I would second that.
For my benefit, because I haven't sat in on the planning meetings, and not to belabor this meeting, but if Walt has an opinion, which is totally against Dirk's,
Mhm.
in that example, do we let him interpret the law?
Not always.
So,
There's times when Dirk has,
right, but if
Yeah.
there's a stalemate, and it seemingly has never happened.
no,
But on
I
the-
don't know.
So,
You guys
on the
know.
1 in 100 chance that it happens, doesn't it seem like a reasonable fix?
Again.
No, because there are other times
Yeah.
within the city that
This
Dirk
is
has
not
had to
about
make.
Walt. This is about, if
No,
you
this is
read.
about all kinds of
it's a-
ordinances.
No, it's about
zoning.
everybody here. So I have a full staff, and I have the responsibility to, for them to know what to do. This has to do with any city staff member, consultant, board commission member. If you disagree, one of you members disagree with Dirk, you'll have to work with each other to figure it out. That's all this is saying. If our staff and our consultants disagree with our city attorney's interpretation of our city code or city ordinance as we're working through our daily operational process, we have to have something in place.
Well, when have they
Every
disagreed?
city's like this.
Yeah, but
When has the staff disagreed, or anybody here?
Well, we go to them all the time because
I
we.
know, and then we accept what he says. Have you?
Right.
So what is wrong with, why do you have to put this in place right away?
It's not
when
right
it-
away, it's the
when the
process
staff
to
always-
go through. There are times I disagree with Dirk on some ordinance language. And if I felt that strongly about it, I would bring it to the city commission through our process, through our policy.
I mean, if you compare the language of the prior section with what you're proposing, there really wasn't any resolution
Right.
of the old language. It just said if there's a disagreement in ordinance interpretation that is not resolved, the city manager will advise the planning chair and mayor of any disagreements involving planning commission agenda items. It doesn't, there's no solution there.
No.
It's just, it ends, this just takes it to the final conclusion and says, well, you know, if there is a disagreement, it will be addressed through the ordinance review process under the city administrative policy. So I don't think there's anything really that different
I
between
feel
the
actually
two.
more comfortable with the new language than I would with the old language.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Because
nothing.
I
yeah.
have a way of resolving it, and it's the
Yeah.
commission that resolves the problem, not somebody just arbitrarily saying, this is what I believe and this is the law. And, I mean,
But everyone respects this, it's not like anybody on the staff or anybody disrespects what Dirk's opinion is. So I don't know that Dave can't do his job because of this change not being in place this month.
I don't think it comes down to whether somebody is disrespecting Dirk or otherwise. I think there are some very ambiguous things that come up that you need special interpretation. And I've got an example right now I could go through. It's fairly detailed, but that's where the ambiguities exist, is kind of in the details, and somebody kind of interprets it this way and somebody interprets it that way. You need somebody that's going to say, this is how I interpret it from a legal standpoint. You may view it this way, and if it's a strong enough disagreement, then there's a channel for that to be discussed and to be worked out and probably to be corrected in the ordinance. And that's all this is doing.
But again, what do we
I-
do?
We're giving
I've-
a brand new lawyer.
I'm sensing a lot of,
The person who's interpreting all of our ordinances, and I don't know that he's familiar with them.
but
like
we
Dirk.
keep
If
talking
Dirk
about
was
this
here-
as if the attorney has the final say. He does
He does.
in that context, but if we don't agree, he doesn't have the final say.
Right.
It comes back to the commission, we discuss it, we either change it or we agree with it.
Well, when has anything ever come back to the commission?
Like, we would be putting, I don't
From the
understand,
planning commission that
from
wasn't
the planning
resolved.
commission, exactly, so,
This is not just about the planning commission. I think there's a misunderstanding. This is about everybody. It's a best practice. That's all this is.
It's just a process. It doesn't matter who the city attorney is. That's
No.
the position, the person holding that position, not the individual. It's just a process to follow. And it certainly suggests that there will be people who disagree, and there will be disagreements, and this is how the disagreement will be resolved. That's, to me, all it says. And
That's
I
it.
don't see anything
gives the final
controversial
say.
about it.
It says
To the
right
new
here, it gives a
lawyer.
final say,
It does-
yeah.
it
Final
does-
interpretation of our ordinances to a new lawyer,
Well,
and then if.
he's
it's-
not a new lawyer. He's been practicing for a long time, and in the material that we received, he has been working with Dirk on our matters over the years. So he's not like he's a newbie just out of law school. He is
My
someone
understanding,
who's
he's
a municipal
wonderful,
lawyer.
no
who's-
disrespect to you, but
Yeah.
he's a prosecuting attorney, so
he's-
You know, I have a lot of, I'll be honest with you, I have a lot of policies, and we have policies all over the place. It helps us run our operations. There's nothing nefarious about this. This is just a best practice. And the only reason that was brought up to you because of this sort of concern about it, but this is a good thing.
well, if there's so much discussion, in my opinion, we should table it and bring it back next month. I mean, after
what are we
you.
tabling?
I would like,
What are we tabling though?
I would
The
like
problem is-
Walt to look at this as chair, and I'd like also the zoning
The zoning
chair to look at it as well.
But-
Not just Walt, but the zoning chair should look at it as well, so he knows what this is all about.
So there's an authority issue here, Dirk.
There is.
So I want you to talk about that.
Well, the authority for administering the day-to-day operations of the city and the policies that go into that are vested in the city manager, not the planning chair. Certainly, commission's got input on policies too, but the day-to-day operations of the city under the charter are under the purview of the city manager.
But the chair of the planning commission is appointed by
The
the
commission,
elected city
yeah.
officials.
According to our charter, he reports to us, not to Dave.
He's
You're right.
elected by the planning
Absolutely.
commission.
And Dave reports to you. Dave's appointed by you too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm like, if Dave's gonna make all the decisions, we're all not needed.
No, I guess all I'm saying is that I have no problem, if you guys don't like this, I'll strike it out of there. But I do have a problem with an appointed member of a board helping me run the daily operations. That is a problem for me.
Oh, it's not running the daily operations.
Well,
This
it's
is a
interpreting.
policy.
It's interpreting policy. Let me
Yes.
just, this is my last thought. Dirk has worked with our ordinances for 40 years.
40 years off and on, right?
40 years. So I'm gonna err that he knows more about it than our planning board members or we do. And certainly if we disagree with something, we have the right to change it. But if there's a meeting in planning or zoning and it can't get resolved, we haven't found an example where that's happened yet. But in the example where it might happen once, we're gonna defer to a guy that's represented these rules for the last 40 years.
But he's
And-
not gonna
He's
be here,
retiring.
he's
No,
retiring.
I
And
know.
Walt has been doing it for 24 years.
It's the same
So in
firm,
my
correct?
opinion, he has.
It's the same firm?
Right.
It's the same firm, it's a different
The
person.
No, I
issue,
understand.
That's like,
the issue shouldn't come down to whether it's Dirk or Mark or Bill Hampton. The issue should come down to, what are you gonna do if you have a serious disagreement about how an ordinance is to be interpreted? You need somebody, maybe it's Dave, maybe whoever you decide it is, you need someone to make the final call. But you can't vest that much power in them. So once that final call is made, if there's still disagreement, then it comes back to the city commission,
Right.
who should make the final decision.
Right. And we can change
Because
the
you
ordinance.
you establish the direction you want to go. That's all this is. And again, it shouldn't matter whether it's me or Mark or Bill Hampton or whoever. It's or Walt or any number of different people. You just have to have a policy that if you get to that point, and it has happened on occasion, it just has.
Right, I respect that, but I think we're also disregarding, a chairperson. I don't know how long the zoning person has been in place. And we're telling them that you had no input in who makes the final decision, and you have 24 years of experience, and now this new lawyer is gonna have the final say over everything.
No, it's just interpretation.
disagree with.
And the planning chair or me or any of the staff can approach the city commission and say, I think this is wrong and we should make a change. That's all this is.
Well, what's wrong with socializing this with the
Yeah.
head of
Why-
the two boards?
I think we should,
Well, I mean, so
What
there's
is your
that,
concern about that?
because I don't, well, I mean, I suppose, does the city commission believe that, first of all, I run the daily operations knowing that our city attorney is the person that interprets our ordinance language. And all of us rely on that. So if that's changed by some other
No,
person,
we all
it
look
doesn't
to
make
the
any
city
sense.
attorney,
Well, that's all this says.
but we always
I think
did.
we're mixing terms here. Interpretation does not mean decision.
Yeah.
It's just who is going to explain what it means, and then he's not making the decision, he's just saying, this is what this is
You
what
all
it
said that
says.
he makes the final decision, and
No,
No.
no,
Still a
he says,
problem,
this
then it
is
goes
what
to
it
city
says,
commission.
and then the planning commission then has to decide, based on what the interpretation of that ordinance is, whether they, want to do this or that, depending on what the interpretation is. It's not a decision.
And if there's still
not
disagreement,
what
it
it
comes back
said.
to the
Yeah,
city
it's not what
commission
I-
who makes the final decision.
Can I at least mention the other component of it that
Sure,
also
please.
might
Yeah.
cause some consternation? So the other part of it that I include is under section 10, subsection B. I believe we should make a change to that. Section 10, subsection B. So there's a requirement of providing a copy of a notice of violation to the mayor and planning chair when an approved planning project is violated. When something is in violation of an ordinance, and if it has to do with a planning commission or ZBA approval, we start the process of correcting the issue through writing a notice of violation. That's not a misdemeanor ticket. That's just to document the issue, provide it to the homeowner. And so I read, I went through this ordinance and I read how we provide this notice of violation to the planning chair and to the mayor. And I thought, in my opinion, the problem with that or I believe that process should be borne out by the folks that are enforcing our ordinances. And so there's many times where Brian will be looking at a site, he sees a violation, he has John write a notice of violation, but they work it out. And so that in those cases, there's no need to forward that notice of violation, because in my opinion, it could create some bias for the future if that case, in fact, ever has to go in front of a board or a commission. Now, it might not be about that specific, part of the notice of violation, but any bias, implicit or otherwise, can create a problem for impartiality, in my opinion. So, if the 4 cases in the last 5 years that have gone back to the planning commission need to go back, we'll provide all the information of the violation if they went to court, whatever the case may be. But I think it's unfair to the residents if we're providing information about us trying to get them to comply with a issue that we found that they probably most likely will comply with. I think it's premature and it's unfair to the homeowner or resident. And so I think that's a pretty simple one, but
what happened to transparency about letting us know what's going on? I mean, what's wrong with, you're assuming there's gonna be bias. Telling them that they did this or whatever.
I'm concerned about it. I'm not assuming there will be, but I think it's a good protection for the city and for all of us, because if someone might get the wrong impression, you'll have to admit there's sometimes in planning commission meetings that people will say something that this property's been a problem or there's always problems, and without all the facts being out there. And I feel that there could be times when folks could be unfairly judged based upon the circumstance. So certainly, if something went back to the planning commission, they would have all that information, but I don't know if it's necessary that we do it right off the bat. It could be 6 months, prior, and we saw a violation, we worked it out. I mean, we could-
name a comment this often, I gotta tell you, I just got back on the planning commission, but I've never been told of a violation that was given. Were you, Brad?
I don't recall.
Right.
Wasn't that the one where the guy was required to get a letter of credit because he hadn't?
Yeah,
he hadn't
there's
done it?
not many of them, but I guess I'm just concerned. I read that and I thought, that doesn't pass the smell test with me. I think it's, to me, it's a little, it could create some impartiality.
But it hasn't had, and we don't get it, I don't see a need for a change in this. I'm like, we cannot solve for everything that could happen. We always talk about transparency, one team, one everything, and I have never, in my entire time working on the planning commission, ever heard of a violation. I have never.
Well, we've talked about misdemeanor, I have talked about it.
Yeah, definitely.
That guy
Well,
got
like,
it.
are you talking about like Linda Court where they clearly put their whole fence in the front yard? So,
Yeah,
and it was pretty clear they were in front of us again because they had violated.
I get it.
But I mean, that's.
But that's different. The notice of violation is a step before that. So sometimes we can work that out, and we don't have to write that
I don't
misdemeanor
recall ever
violation.
being notified of people's violations in
Well,
the city.
Let me
Right.
know if you get one, bring it over every time. No, I'm just kidding. I'm
Well,
just like, we
there-
haven't.
Okay, to be honest with you, there probably have been times when we have caught people, maybe building something or doing something against ordinance. And you're right. So in this policy, that means I got to run and give you that notice of violation. But that's not necessarily, in my opinion, the best course of action to begin with. Let's see if we can work this issue out without alarming anybody. Not to say that's going to guarantee cause any sort of bias, but it's a better practice. If there's a misdemeanor violation, sure, we're going to let you guys know. But if it's never going to happen, I don't know if it's like stopping someone and giving them a warning for speeding. It's if we can work the issue
I
out.
thought that's kind of what you always did anyway, so I don't know
know.
why.
I don't know why we're changing it. I don't.
Because it's written in here that I have to provide it in all cases, and I'm concerned that I have a policy written that way that is not doing what is not the practice.
Is it
we have.
maybe also somewhat of the concern that it's one of those policies that's hard to abide by?
Yes.
And therefore, you'd rather change it so that you can be in compliance?
Yes.
Versus, maybe you forgot to notify or whatever, and it was not a big
Yes.
deal, but it says you have to do it, so now.
So you want to be able to determine if you notify anybody of mistakes?
Well, I don't want to be in a place where I've got a policy and we're not complying with it because we're trying to do the right thing by, hey, we find an issue, we want to work it out. But this policy makes me do something that we're probably not doing, to be honest with you. So, because we're working on a lot of issues, and that's why they don't come back to the planning
We
commission.
do work a lot of issues on
So just continue what you're doing.
I just want to make sure it's not in a policy that I have. I abide by these things, so it's important to me that I don't have something written down that requires me to do something that's really not a best practice in what we do right now.
I don't have a problem with aligning this with what's actually happening. It's
I don't either.
my thought on it.
Okay, well, there's no vote on it. It was just brought
What I
up.
mean is, I don't have a problem with
Right.
changing it to this to align with what you're doing.
Right,
now.
thank you.
I do not either.
Thank you very much.
I still, I don't think we've resolved this, and I don't think we're going to tonight, but
I would like
it's
to
just,
propose.
it's sort of like Brad's decision on the garbage thing. We all got the garbage, like, oh, we're gonna change our garbage pickup to Friday, and we're all sitting here going, and then
Right.
Brad comes up and goes, well, let's find out what our residents want, because they're the most affected by it. And I thought, it's the right thing to do. By the way, that would be in my questions for you.
Yep, it's coming.
I feel this way about this. We are doing a change, it's affecting two other people on this. We need to have them be involved with it and have some kind of say. They need to review it before
I
we
think we need
approve
to
it.
respect the people
Yeah.
who been chair for 24 years and,
That's-
and run it by them, at least give them the,
He's 12 years, right? 14 years, but.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt, and it gives them feeling,
you know, partly because I know I'm a broken record about being a new lawyer, but
yeah.
it's like saying his experience doesn't count. I just think, out of respect for the chair, that
Yeah, we should.
I
At
want to
least
be, I want to be,
socialize it
I want to
with
be
them.
careful how we say this, because we're almost saying we don't trust the interpretation of the new lawyer. I just want to.
no, but I want to show respect to someone who knows the ordinances inside and out and
Yeah.
has
Th-
worked
th-
with them
I don't think
for
this says anything about
years.
the knowledge of the chair. And I don't think it's a problem to show this to the chair, but I think at the end of the day, per Dirk, Dave has the authority to make the change to the policy.
Yes,
So-
I want Dave to have the authority,
about
but I
this?
want to show respect to
How
someone.
about I show him
who's-
respect? I will meet with
I
him.
mean,
I will personally meet with him. I'll talk to him about this and what it means and why. And I'll tell him if he has any problems with it, he can talk to the mayor. But I'll talk with him. I'd be happy to talk with him. I think this is the right thing to do.
Actually, I would have the mayor in that meeting, but that's just my 2 cents.
I-
or someone else, I don't know.
Yeah, or somebody. Okay, can
All
we
right,
move on?
moving on?
Yes.
The manager's comments, please?
So, good comment on the garbage because it was 82% no.
Yeah,
It's a big no. So, great job by
Idea,
Commissioner.
Brad.
I
I didn't see that one.
Brad,
so.
look at you. Kudos for that one.
And
Read
be
the
honest,
room.
so the feedback was, great idea one day, bad idea on Friday. So,
Yeah.
that's the feedback.
Yeah, my 92-year-old
So-
neighbor called me and was just screaming me for a half hour.
So I don't feel totally, upset for bringing it up to the commission as an idea for one day. But, yeah, the Friday didn't go well,
Didn't
so.
go well.
So they don't want to do one day during the week,
But
other
they-
than
They,
Friday?
one day is fine, they just don't
They
want to do
don't
Friday.
care. I mean, they will keep our day, right?
Yeah, it's
They
all,
don't
it's all
require
fine, but
us to
it was
choose.
that Friday, and it was about going away on the weekends, just like you said.
Yeah.
It's exactly what you said. So, you must have, you're really in tune to the city.
Thank you.
No more trash.
Any other comments, manager?
No, I don't have anything else. Thank you very much I know it's a little difficult going through this. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Okay.
So, if there's no further business, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Yes.
So moved. I second that.
Great. City council meeting is adjourned. Our next meeting is Tuesday, March 11th, 2025.